must appreciate SADTU for hosting us. The effort the Student Charter has made to host the PYA, especially at this difficult time when the progressives are under attack. The progressives are under attack from all corners, internally and externally. Every day we're resolving problems. The purpose of this summit also is so that we have a coordinated effort of all progressives to one direction. Because if the enemy finds us weak, they'll finish the little that is left of the progressive movement, and the gains of freedom will be reversed.
Comrades, I'll be introducing the Deputy President of the Union, Comrade Mabuto Cele, who has served in many different structures of the Union, from a branch level, at a regional level, and also at a provincial level as well. He does not only serve within SADTU, but he also serves in other structures. You may ascend to the stage, Comrade Mabuto Cele, the Deputy President of the Union. Thank you.
Comrades, leaders, friends, and patriots, it gives us a great pleasure as South African Democratic Teachers Union, the largest union in the public sector, to welcome all of you to our facilities as you chart the way forward on the contemporary and critical matters that affect our people, in particular, our young people. As such, we are happy to play this role because we appreciate that it cannot be business as usual, comrades. When we are faced with many challenges that adversely affect the largest demographic of our society, the young people, we can only be proud as education workers, teachers, that our student chapter, who are associate members of our union, according to our constitution, could take us on board in this important conversation through their participation. We believe that the participation of the student chapter in this summit is the participation of SADTU, and therefore as SADTU, we are very, very proud and excited to be given these particular opportunities. Comrades, spring has sprung, the flowers are blooming, and so should be the ideas that will emerge from this very important YPA summit, the innovations that we need to also inspire our leaders at a government level and a broader movement lie with you. Ask yourself this very important question: if not now, when? If not you, who? As young people, you really need to stand up and take charge and be able to lead the national democratic revolution moving forward. I'm just highlighting this reality so that as you gather here for this summit, you are conscious of the fact that we actually look up to you to provide us with innovative solutions for challenges of the day, confronting the working class and the poor masses of our people, especially the young people who remain idly in the townships and villages because of lack of employment and or business opportunities. Our hopes are with you, comrades. I am of the firm view that looking at the objectives of this summit as set by yourselves, you are not here to lament, but to chart the way forward. It is common cause, comrades, that the National Democratic Revolution, as an immediate program for mass democratic movement, is to a particular extent at crossroads, with many unprecedented realities and conditions that we are observing. The president of the Youth League defined them as attacks on the progressive forces. These realities can only be detrimental to this very common program called the National Democratic Revolution, whilst seismic shifts are unfolding at a global geopolitical level. We want to plead with you that you also have time as you engage collectively to discuss how are you going to defend the gains made since 1994, to also discuss what is it that needs to be done, and also to discuss positive reforms that are brought by our democratic government under the leadership of the ANC, like your Bella Bill, which is meant to ensure that doors of learning are open for all. However, the counter-revolutionaries are there to ensure that such a bill is not implemented in its totality. It is to you to defend programs like the National Health Insurance, which is meant to ensure that all citizens get quality primary health care. And again, the counter-revolutionary forces are there to ensure that such does not happen. The threat facing the promulgation of the Tobacco Product and Electronic Delivery Systems Control Bill is there, is visible, comrades. It's up to you to go and defend young people and protect them from the capitalist beneficiation on matters such as these tobacco products, which are killing our young people. Even the vapors, the scientists will tell you they are the most silent killers that are affecting our people. The summit is taking place during the month of September, the Heritage Month. I also wish to challenge the summit to ensure that we use the Heritage Month for ideological grounding, conscientization of our young people of their class positioning, whether ideologically correct or wrong. But I believe that young people should rise to build themselves as a strata, not in itself, but a strata for itself. Young people remains the majority of our country, which means that it's high time that we start to think about young people and be able to think for our future. Also, not in a narrow and myopic sense of ageism, unguided radicalism, ill discipline, or refusal to self-cultivate. You cannot lead a revolution if you are not prepared to self-cultivate, to read and understand, develop yourself, provide yourself with the necessary tools to be able to analyze society so that you can then be able to engage on matters that are confronting society. I think that also becomes a very, very important task that is facing you as young people, which is to ensure that we engage seriously on matters of decolonization. I just want to leave it with you, comrades, to deal with matters of decolonization, deconstruction, and reconstruction of our world outlook as young people, as South Africans, as Africans in Africa, so that we ensure that we defend and protect the future of our continent. Therefore, this summit is expected to at least process and identify your mission as a generation so that you can be able to fulfill it. But fundamentally, what you must do as young people is to be able to identify your mission as this generation and then ensure that you carry out and fulfill your mission moving forward. But I must caution you, the mission will remain impossible and insurmountable unless we unite as young people. Maybe unit of progressive forces and motive forces of our revolution for change is largely dependent on the unity of the Progressive Youth Alliance. It's therefore your responsibility to defend your future, whether it's the youth of 76, otherwise, comrades, we might as well forget about our freedom and democracy. Our historic and strategic mission is the advancement of the national democratic revolution. We may differ on tactics. We must therefore not allow tactics to make us enemies. Is it because, comrades, we are unable to put aside our few differences and focus more on the many matters of agreement that brings us together so that we can be able to take our country forward? I think that's a question as young people that you must respond to. That are our differences that important such that they surpass the many other areas that we agree on, that we can be able to engage and then be able to move forward. You are most welcome at Matthew Goniwe House, the home of education workers. You may have your robust, honest conversation that should lead to solutions of our country as well as solutions of the challenges confronting our young people. Inspire us as young people. Use your youthfulness to unite the movement.
And we're grateful, comrades, for your attendance today. We are now going to call on the president of the ANC Youth League, President Colin Malachi, to come and give us the purpose of the meeting. President, the floor is yours.
There's been a concerted effort to depoliticize the country. Clean program that anything political or politics must not exist, to elevate right-wing funded NGOs to undermine the progressive gains of freedom. I'm saying equal education is funded to undermine COSAS every day, while COSAS is defunded. SATSCO, I'm sure, is facing the same problems also. The Youth League is facing the same problems. The purpose of the summit is to revive this platform called the Progressive Youth Alliance. What unites us is a program of action called the National Democratic Revolution. That's what puts us together. Now, when we are saying you are progressive, it means that you are aligned to that program. By you being here, it means that we are all aligned. I think in the political report, which I'm going to present in the NGC, there's a part, one paragraph that I wrote and I feel I must read. I took it from the NTR. It says the NTR is a process of struggle that aims to transfer power to the people. Power relates to political power, economic power, and social issues. The objective of the NTR is to build a truly united, democratic, prosperous South Africa, in which the values of all citizens is measured by humanity without regard to race, gender, social status. ANC sets goals for each phases of the NTR, which is contained in the very important document called the Strategy and Tactics. Now, I felt that I must mention this point because it's a very important program of action that unites us. Now, the purpose of this meeting is to gather all progressives. One is to check if the NTR is still on course. But two, because the ANC has identified the state as a vehicle to advance the National Democratic Revolution, as a vehicle to advance the National Democratic Revolution, to ultimately arrive to where we say is our dreamland. Those who go to church, we call it heaven, called the National Democratic Society. This progressive youth, our job through our presentations, it is not only to complain, but it's to track whether is the NTR on course. Now that the Western Cape as a province is led by the DA, does it mean that the revolution is suspended in the Western Cape? Because if the ANC has identified the state as a vehicle to advance the revolution, the National Democratic Revolution, now in areas where the state is in the hands of counter-revolution, does it mean the revolution is suspended? And I think that's a discussion you must have. I have an answer, I'd say yes. Because we don't expect counter-revolution to advance the program of action which they are anti. But the debate for another day. PYA is a combination of progressive organizations that have constituencies which they are mobilizing towards the National Democratic Revolution. We need to have a discussion on how to broaden the PYA with all progressives. Now, organizations that have no membership, who are organizing, how do we open space for them to participate also in the PYA and find a way around it? And I think that's a discussion we must have in our discussions in the summit. But mainly, we've also invited our deployed comrades to also brief us of programs that they do in government. But also, we don't become ambassadors of those programs in our communities, because the youth does not follow people who just speak but don't resolve their problems. Now, we must be seen to be resolving socio-economic problems and action taken. If you are driving into your car, you just pass the pothole or swear. You don't stop and resolve it and use your power in legislature, call the MEC of infrastructure or the municipal. If the communities don't follow you, communities always follow people who resolve problems. Because they don't join the ANC because they love the colors of black, green, and gold. They join the ANC because they believe that it's a parliament of the people. It will resolve their socio-economic problems. The moment you don't resolve them, they will not follow you. Now, that's why we invited our comrades who are deployed, Comrade Stella Ndabeni, who's a minister of a very important department of small businesses. We've invited Comrade Maruping, who's dealing with planning, monitoring, and evaluation. We've invited Comrade Putima Namela, because most of us here were majority stakeholders of that Department of Education also, to come and brief us on programs that must happen. Then we invited Comrade Joel to come and give us an analysis of the strategy and tactics. Now, that is the purpose of this gathering. But the outcomes that we want to get out of this gathering, we should have answered the question that is the NTR on course. We've invited the NYDA to also give us their youth plan and how they want us to support them. Now, all of these people who have invited here, these comrades, they are progressive comrades of the movement, which must engage, and they must engage us on how to support them. So that we make a conclusion whether the NTR is on course or not, and which areas must we amend so that the revolution is not suspended. In areas where we believe the state is in the hands of counter-revolution, how do we enter to resolve that? But ultimately, we want to come out with a program of action. And as the Youth League, we are going to our NGC. We've already defined our battle arena. The Veterans League is saying renewal or death. The Youth League was saying economic freedom or death. Both these organizations, we have defined our part to say that if the ANC is not renewed, it's going to die. The Youth League further adds on what the Veterans League is saying, that if the structure of the economy remains the same, the face of poverty remains the way it is, our people are still dispossessed from the economic activities, unemployed, on the streets, our township continue to become holidays, undocumented foreigners run around the way they want in our country, our spaza shops are still in the hands of foreigners. We have not introduced export quotas on raw materials. We're not beneficiating here in the country. We're not industrializing the economy. We're selling rail every day. Then that's death. Because our people will turn against us. They'll turn against us because we will not have resolved their socio-economic problems. Now, I'm sure through our discussions, we'll ultimately conclude to one joint program. All of us here, we know, must unite and close rank, because if we don't unite, the gains of democracy and of the movements will be suspended. And you can see now, we're in the GNU. Every day, the DA differs with us openly. Even when they're in government, they're still opposition. They want to reverse the affirmative action. They want to reverse the triple BE. They want to reverse the Bella Act. They want to reverse the NHI. They want to reverse anything that is progressive, because the DA and its allies and Afro Forum, they say they believe that there was never apartheid, blacks were never oppressed, whites were not privileged, were all equal, the child of Rupert and the child of Maduna are the same thing. They all have companies and shares, and that they can wake up in the morning and be CEOs. Now, they don't believe that there was once an oppression, and the ANC, through its program of National Democratic Revolution, can resolve all of those problems. Now, we have a bigger task ahead of us. We are meeting here in the summit, comrades, at a time where the progressive combined are at 40%. Because those elections, we have lost them combined. We campaigned with Sanko, we campaigned SACP, COSATU. All of us combined as progressives were at 40%. Now, it's not only the ANC that is at 40%, it's all progressive combined. Now, I felt, comrades, in the purpose of the meeting, I must address those issues and say that, comrades, as you have been welcomed, the summit is officially open. Thank you, DSG.
We are now going to take addresses. We are going to first start with SAIC, as per request. The comrades from SAIC can come and address us.
Colleagues, as stated earlier on, my name is Tolika Sibiya. Suffice to say, if you have been following the development of the Congress Youth League, in its resolutions, amongst many that it took in 1996, was the need to form or establish the council in the Republic to coordinate a number of activities. So that's why it's important for us as the council that the PYA, amongst other organizations, in addition to member organizations, has a responsibility really to, not to defend, but to educate the youth and society broadly about this organization. We thank you most sincerely, colleagues, for organizing this important gathering. For strategic youth formations who are progressively aligned to reflect on what needs to be done. And given the strategic setbacks that we have suffered in the national and provincial general elections, the strategic setback we have suffered has resulted into programs, initiatives and platforms that are ordinarily should have been coordinated by these youth formations under the umbrella of the Youth Council have been hijacked by what we call the agents of provocateurs, the anti-Congress sentiments. This challenge is aided by the fact that we have people who are not drawn from the theater of struggles of our people, not known amongst our structures, given strategic responsibilities in government. While this group of liberals and its offsprings seem to enjoy hegemony under this GNU arrangement, our view as council is that we must never get tired to assert ourselves as youth formations and have our presence felt, even if it means we must oppose and contradict and challenge those we call comrades in government. We don't want to labor much on these issues that continue to besiege the Republic 31 years into our political breakthrough. Suffice to say, you seated here as different youth formations. You know these challenges that confront your constituency, and we have expressed these quite extensively in your different position paper or concept note and discussion document. Suffice to say, amongst other things, the structural makeup of our economy is one of an issue that really needs to be looked at and discussed. On behalf of the National Executive Committee, allow us to say we wish the PYA Summit all of a success in its deliberations. It's a conversation that we wish to be part of, for we believe that we may make submissions on the strategic value or not, if ultimately the PYA, as it were, decide to expand the scope beyond of what it is. Otherwise, thank you so much, colleagues. Siyabulela.
We are now going to call a SATU student chapter. Can you come through?
My name is Unomfundo Dube. I'm the deputy convener of student chapter of ISATU. We are enjoying youth activism across all 9 provinces, which then translates into our undeniable visibility in the 11 traditional universities, the 9 universities of technology, and the remaining 6 comprehensive universities that we're finding in South Africa. Comrades, we gather at a time of deep concern and a need of urgent reflection. The spirit of our youth is being tested by the unkind realities of unemployment, inequality, and a gross loss to opportunities. Across our 257 municipalities in the country, a massive crowd of young South Africans wake up. Some they're having qualifications in hand, some are dropouts, and some are still in the system, which naleyo ntonje of being in the system is a serious bone of contention in my head. They wake up, but with no employment in sight, which then leads to an immediate deferment of dreams and aspirations and an unrealized potential. Though I may not fully understand or even interpret the figures in the field of e-commerce, I do understand what is meant by keeping your head above water. And that is the exact term that was used by a report given at Statistics South Africa in the first quarter of 2025, where our GDP grew slightly by 0.1%. So in layman language, comrades, what that means is that, of course, there is a growth, but it is a downward growth. The growing, and that downward growth is apportioned to the growing pains of the unemployment, so the triple threats that we are finding ourselves in this country. The above growth, comrades, doesn't do anything in improving the basic standards of living. We are constantly told of a skills mismatch and a lack of experience as contributing factors. Now, even though these may carry a little bit of honest or truth in them, we need to be equally honest in saying that skill mismatching is not a new phenomenon. We as a country are loaded with a generation of qualified in whatever respect, whether academically or socially. We have qualified youths who are underutilized, they are highly informed, yet they are financially excluded. The bottom line is that education has given us information, but not the tools. You are encouraged to go to school and pass with distinction, comrades, but not to create value. Now we are encouraged to go and seek employment, but not how to build empires for the purposes of generational wealth. We as the majority are soft-locked. Now soft-lock means that from the outside, the perception is that we are doing just fine. However, the loud and resounding reality is that we were subconsciously taught how to admire wealth, but not how to generate it ethically, sustainably, and most importantly, inclusively. Maybe if we create lobby groups pushing for in-depth curriculum configurations where entrepreneurial education isn't a passing point. We are calling for a rigorous and sizable chapter on financial literacy, business development, and the likes. Let us invest in making operational concepts such as blue economy known to our youth. Schools must adapt, and the private sector must invest. Comrades, unity among all leaders of the PYA is crucial for a social change and community empowerment. When youth leaders collaborate efficiently, the amplification of the youth voice, it rings loud and clear, and that in itself allows for one to be better positioned in terms of e-policy influence and systemic transformation. We need to have a shared vision and values on matters such as education reform, political engagement, equality, environmental sustainability, and social justice, to name just a few. I am elated to be part of this collaborative forum, whereby alliance partners present and stakeholders alike will be working on specific issues. Our diverse approaches and experiences should never be misquoted as being anti-revolutionary to the principles of the Freedom Charter. We, from the Astute Student Chapter of ISATU, wish for this summit to produce practical, simple yet far-reaching results. Let this summit be remembered as a turning point, not for spoken words, but rather for actions. In the unwavering spirit of unity, in the name of progress, and in the name of those who came before us, forward we go, backwards never. Unite, PYA, unite.
Can we now call upon a NUM youth structure?
Permit me, Chair, not to omit an opportunity that seeks to convey our revolutionary greetings on behalf of the National Union of Mine Workers Youth Structure. With your permission, I think it's befitting that we must indicate that indeed the unity of the PYA components is sacrosanct. This sitting today seeks to remind us of our duties and responsibilities during this time of deepening and growing crisis in our country, and therefore to develop the methods to reaffirm and uphold our revolutionary principles. Comrades, we are meeting or we are gathered here today at a time where our country is confronted with enormous challenges, growing crises on a daily basis. a time when majority of our people, in particular youth, are faced with enormous retrenchment, unemployment, and poverty. The levels of unemployment in this country are unjustifiable. Speaking to yourselves today here, comrades, coming from the mining sector, 2-3 years ago, we're confronted with a situation where one of the mining bosses got a bonus of 300 million rand and refused to give workers a mere 1,000 rand wage increase. Yet our people are subjected to unsafe working conditions. The working hours are unsafe to such an extent that even the personal PPE, the personal protective equipment, is at times denied to the very same people that we seek to be representing. And in the main, it's young people. We are gathered here today, comrades. We are faced with serious job bloodbath. ArcelorMittal has announced to be retrenching more than 4,000 workers. Glencore will be retrenching more than 3,000 workers. There's a mine in Northern Cape will be retrenching over 700 employees. Generally, we are confronted with a serious predicament where young people in the main will be losing employment because of a policy of first in, first out. But however, comrades, we think this is the relevant platform to bring to your attention some of the challenges and the predicaments that we're confronted with on a daily basis. But we must indicate that, comrades, this is not natural disasters, but is the repercussions of a system called capitalist system. The capitalist system, which thrives on the exploitation of labor power for profit of few. It is ourselves that we must wage a relentless struggle against capitalism. We must continue to champion the aspirations and interests of our constituencies, which in the main are young people. Comrade President, it's as though we have caucused. You did mention that the progressive labor relations or the revolutionary gains are at cul-de-sac or at a threat of being reversed as a result of counter-revolutionary organizations such as the Democratic Alliance. The Democratic Alliance has taken to court the Employment Equity Act today. The affirmative action, which amongst others seeks to redress the imbalances of the past, employ women into the working spaces, they have set everything aside, sent to the courts of law to set everything aside. Correctly said, they pretend as though there's never been apartheid. They pretend as though we have not suffered anything. But yet, comrades, these are the very same people who are in government with. Labor Relations Act equally is at the threat of reversal. In particular, the right to strike. Can you imagine a country which has, the workers do not have the right to strike? These are the gains which our forebearers have waged in. Comrades ASCO, we wish to encourage yourselves, or perhaps when we are living here, to agree that we in the mining sectors are operating 24 hours. Therefore, there's no justification why the institutions of higher learning are closed 2 a.m. Each and every year we have more than 500,000 matriculants passing, but the capacity of institutions of higher learning is half 250,000. Therefore, it compels us to bring about ideas in which we seek to revive this. There's a serious threat that which we're confronted with called the just energy transition, as I'm lending chair. Comrades, in terms of the Paris Agreement, it clearly indicates that the developed countries should give the developing and underdeveloped countries money, not in a form of a loan. But we are told today South Africa has gotten more than 8.7 billion rand US dollars of a loan. It's ourselves who are going to pay this loan. We have more than 200 years of mining coal in South Africa. Africa as a whole constitutes less than 2% of carbon emissions. But yet we are the first to move away from a precious mineral that we have. There's nothing justifiable in that. It is yourselves again, comrades, that we need to wage this relentless struggle. But we must depart, Chair, with reaffirming and expressing our support for the entire axis of resistance, which encompasses the nations and the movements standing against imperialist aggression in the Middle East. And we condemn the ongoing attacks on Palestine by the imperialist forces and the regional proxies, including Israel, which is sponsored by the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Sanko, please.
Any organization without or which does not recognize young people and which does not create a space for young people does not have future. These are the most important structures in our organizations because this is what determines what the future looks like. We must appreciate being part of this historical summit of the PYA. Comrades, we are at war, as I have already said, and all the missiles are directed to us. And one need not to remind you of the social ills we are facing, and what honestly worries us is that some of our own comrades are still on honeymoon while the battle is actually reaching its climax. History has started judging us harshly. We are going to go down in history, whether one likes it or not, as the generation in which the ANC, as the liberation movement, was reduced to a 40% party. And that is the sad reality that we must face. And as you said it earlier, so we have a serious task ahead of us of bringing the ANC back to its original form, which is being the leader of the society. The challenges that we are facing, comrades, are self-inflicted. We can't really call ourselves a leader of the society anymore. But it is the responsibility of this generation to make sure that we take the ANC back to where it belongs. But it has to start with the change of our own attitude. The attitude of the ANC leadership towards its own voters. The attitude of the ANC leadership towards each other. And that is why we've got so many factions. And ultimately, the attitude of the ANC towards the organization itself, which is the ANC. So if we are really going to change and bring back the ANC to its original form, we need to change our attitude first. We need you to lead, but as Sanko, we are here to ensure our unwavering support to PYA and to the progressives that form the liberation movement, which we regard or which we call as the ANC. We must not lose each other after this summit. We need to meet regularly. We need to monitor progress on anything that we are doing. The alarming and skyrocketing of unemployment in our country are totally unjustifiable. We have a province called the Northwest Province, which is rotten in terms of minerals, but yet is leading in terms of unemployment. So let's take the battle heads on, Mr. President. You have our support. We will be where you want us to be, but the future of this country depends on us. Thank you.
Can we now call upon Dinosa to come and utilize that 5 minutes productively?
I am Lisakanya Pinase, the national convener of Dinosa Student Movement. Comrades, Dinosa Student Movement is not just any other student structure. It is the only organization that organizes and represents student nurses in South Africa. We gather here under the proud banner of the PYA, not as fragmented formations competing for space, rooted in the struggles of our people. As Dinosa Student Movement, we shoulder a double responsibility to represent the interest of nursing and health sciences students and to stand shoulder to shoulder with all the students and workers in the fight for free, quality, decolonized education and a just society. Now, unfortunately, comrades, we meet under very unhealthy conditions. The youth of this country is in a critical condition, lying in the ICU of politics. But as nurses in training, we know when a patient is collapsing, you don't stand aside. You start resuscitation. You check the pulse, you give oxygen, you shock the patient back to rhythm. As Dinosa Student Movement, our role in the youth movement is exactly that, to resuscitate the youth struggle, to restore political consciousness, to make the PYA a living, breathing force in the society. Comrades, our struggle as Dinosa student movement is not inseparable from the broader struggles of the PYA. We locate ourselves in the tradition of COSATU, the SACP, and the ANC Youth League of old. Movements that understood that the fight for social justice included the fight for decent healthcare, dignified working conditions, and the professional development of nurses. Comrades, our sector faces challenges that cannot be ignored. As students, comrades, we are often used as free labor in hospitals. Comrades, there is this program that they call R171. You spend 4 months in class and 8 months in the hospital. And when you're in the hospital, comrades, you work exactly like a professional nurse, but the remuneration is not the same. The Dinosa student movement rejects the unhealthy habits of fragmentation amongst progressive forces. A divided PYA is like a patient with multiple organ failure, each organ fighting on its own. But when SASCO fights for free education, when YCL fights for socialism, when COSAS fights for learner dignity, and when Dinosa student movement fights for health justice, these are not separate struggles. They are one body, one patient, and one revolution. This is why we call for a stronger, more disciplined, politically conscious PYA. Comrades, history has placed a drip in our hands, a drip that fits the future. We cannot afford to stand by as passive observers while our people suffer. We must mobilize health sciences students to see themselves as not just trainees, but as part of the revolutionary force for change. When clinics run out of medicine, when hospitals collapse, when students drop out because of hunger in our universities, or these issues are symptoms of a deeper disease called capitalism and inequality. As Dinosa student movement, we pledge our unwavering commitment to the unity of the PYA and the liberation of our people. We are ready to bandage the wounds of our nation to inject revolutionary energy into the veins of the youth. And we stand in the front line of both healthcare and political struggles.
We as COSAS, we want the land reform expropriation of land without compensation, industrial development, a robust national industrial development strategy to drive economic growth, job creation, youth entrepreneurship, increased funding for youth, corporate development, access to markets and education, and also students' life. Quality education, free, compulsory, decolonized, and dynamic education for all. Social justice, equity, gender-based violence, ending violence, femicide, healthcare, observation of community healthcare, nurses, doctors, and pharmacists in the public healthcare system. Comrades, we know that as COSAS, we don't want the Minister of Basic Education, Sivuyo Garube. And we're very clear and resolute that the Sivuyo must be removed. We're not going to be scared. And we've told the President of the ANC that, President, if you are not going to listen to us, we're going to the Lutuli, we're going to close Lutuli House, we're not going to be scared. Inga soga no mananini. We don't want Sivuyo, we're very clear. And we are very clear, if it means that the ANC Youth League must give us one person to be the Minister of Basic Education, let it be Amanda. Away to...
Now going to ask SASCO to come to the fourth.
Comrades, for those of you who may not know, SASCO is in the process of launching its Students' Charter. The Students' Charter is a new program in the sense that it's something that's built on the years of work in which SASCO has existed as a students' movement, as the only students' movement that exists by and for the students. In saying that, comrades, the Students' Charter is something that we intend to take to all of the comrades within the Progressive Youth Alliance for purposes of adopting it within the structures. Comrades, the Students' Charter is something that is based on this vision that was outlined correctly by Comrade President and by all of the comrades who have spoken about what it is that brings the PYA together. Comrades, the Progressive Youth Alliance must not be treated as an alliance of convenience. We are not in an alliance here for convenient purposes, comrades. When we say the Progressive Youth Alliance, what we are saying is, comrades, that we need to develop progressive political programs to ensure that we advance what the students and what young people in this country need, comrades. And so in saying that, comrades, we must be very clear. There is no national democratic society without free education in this country, comrades. In saying that, comrades, allow me to then begin by presenting part of the Students' Charter. The intention here, comrades, is that the Students' Charter will be shared within the next few hours with all of the comrades who are present here today and the relevant structures for purposes of taking it to the relevant decision-making structures. In saying that, comrades, the Students' Charter is built on 6 pillars. The beauty of the Students' Charter is that it's a consultative document in the sense that it's not something that was drafted by the NEC in some ivory tower away from the students. The intention here, comrades, is that we take the Students' Charter to the students. And in doing so, and again, where the Progressive Youth Alliance needs to go, returning activism to the constituencies. We cannot be a Progressive Youth Alliance for our leaders, comrades. We need to be a Progressive Youth Alliance for the youth. The politics of the PYA must be centered solely on the youth of this country. And equally, comrades, the Students' Charter exists only for the students of this country. In saying that, comrades, there are 6 pillars that speak to the lived realities of the students of this country, comrades. The first pillar being access to post-schooling education and training for all. Comrades, education must be free and open to all at all institutions of learning and training. 3 decades into democracy, we only have built 2 institutions and renovated 1 university. That is not tolerable, comrades. And when we speak about the national democratic society that we seek to achieve, we cannot do so on 2 universities built in 30 years. There's only 50 TVET colleges, comrades. Till today, we sit in a position where there are thousands, tens of thousands of students who apply for higher education and are kept out of higher education, comrades. Simply put, we cannot be in a position where only people who have access to capital are deserving of dignity, whether it's students or whether it's young people. In saying that, comrades, all campuses shall be centers of multilingualism, multiculturalism, non-racialism, non-sexism, and collective prosperity and achievement. Institutional cultures that we know exist within institutions of higher learning, comrades, that are born from colonial and apartheid oppression, shall be dismantled and transformed. Comrades, violence, sexual assault, rape, gender-based violence, and danger of any kind shall not exist within the student or youth space, comrades. The third pillar that I want to speak to just very briefly, the curriculum shall be transformed and decolonized. Comrades, we understand that as the students' movement, the first point of departure in democratic South Africa was not on access to higher education. It was on curriculum, because we knew, comrades, rightfully pointed out by comrades within the labor union's youth structures, comrades, within comrades from DENOSA, within comrades from SADTU. Comrades, unless you have a workforce that is conscientized, you do not have a workforce. You only have people who are being exploited. And so, comrades, curriculum must be able to educate every young person within in the agenda of conscientizing them to be able to recognize that their work must be their work and not something that is exploited, comrades. The fourth pillar, employment after education shall thrive, comrades. We know too well that education without employment is worth the piece of paper that degree comes on. We need, comrades, mandatory employment, internships, and placement support for all who complete their studies. We need to be speaking about a sovereign wealth fund in order to fund the social safety net that we need to achieve within society. Comrades, we cannot be in a country in which 10% of the population owns over 1/3 of the wealth. That's a moral failure within the context of the National Democratic Revolution, comrades. In saying that, the fifth pillar, comrades, is that the students shall graduate alive. No student shall be denied access to medical services within institutions and residences. The last pillar, comrades, that I want to speak to here very briefly, institutions of learning, comrades, shall belong to the students. Institutions of learning shall not belong to management or to stakeholders within governance. They must belong to the students, comrades. And so, again, comrades, the intention here is that when we do share this, we get some sort of discourse and engagement in order to ensure that the Progressive Youth Alliance does not exist within a rhetorical sense, but within a sense that we're actually working on the programs that benefit young people in this country. There are 3 things that we've identified that we seek to put forward to the Progressive Youth Alliance, comrades. The first, like I said, is a wealth tax. We cannot be in a country, comrades, where rich people continue to get richer. We need to be able to redistribute wealth in a manner in which the most vulnerable within our society benefit the greatest. Comrades, we need to ensure that we have the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which will ensure that social safety net, higher education, basic education, health, housing is protected and advanced in a manner that is sustainable, comrades. Finally, comrades, we must not be in a position where we are reliant on our exploiters for jobs, comrades. We need to be able to capacitate the state with the ability to govern society in such a way that it actually advances. Comrades, Allow me to submit. We will share these documents in due course. But comrades, the intention here, like I said, is not just to reaffirm the position that we have within the Progressive Youth Alliance. It's to ensure that the Progressive Youth Alliance is functional and it works towards the benefit of young people in this country. Amandla!
Can we now have Young Communist League coming to the podium?
The Young Communist League stands there while there's a standing resolution of the Special National Congress of the party that was taken in December that says we are contesting local government. We can discuss, comrades, we can debate, but the resolution is standing. We can take the advices, but the only other platform that will be able to change the resolution is the next Congress, which is in 2 years' time, after the local government elections. And therefore, we must find each other. How do we make the resolution not to divide us, but unite us and make us a stronger movement? Because kudala silapha kodwa ke sidinga usebenza sonke ukwenzela bana ngaba singahusulani ayilo dabi lethu eli kodwa lidabi lempula sikaLjaca, that our people, the working class and the poor, must be able to find solace in the movement and see that we see our plight and they are plight. And as the Young Communist League, we stand here to say, asilwi maqabane koko, we are implementing a resolution of the Congress. We cannot do otherwise. As you know, comrades, Frantz Fanon said each generation must, out of relative austerity, must find its mission, fulfill it or betray it. It is up to this PYA that we decide whether we fulfill or betray. There's a lot that is facing us at this point in time, and we need to find each other. The PYA is a strategic coalition of progressive youth organizations in South Africa, united under the banner of the South African National Congress and its reputed alliance partners, including South African Communist Party and the Congress of Trade Unions, formed to advance the national democratic and the PYA seeks to mobilize, educate, agitate young people in pursuit of non-racial, sexist, democratic, prosperous society. There's no resolution that is saying the alliance is being dissolved and is going to be dissolved in the foreseeable future. We can work better if we find other ways of mobilizing the working class and the poor, so that sizophuma kule ndawo yokukhangela abanye abantu bokusebenzisana koko sikwazi usebenzisana sibheka phambili. I want to enter to this debate that we must be very vocal when TTI is threatening to blacklist students because they are owing. Yet those students are the same students are on the unemployed list. Abanye internships that will, after that there's no prospects. We must put our firm no to say you cannot blacklist any investment, because once you blacklist them, it means that you are taking the chances of them being employed or being able to give back the money that you say they are owing. We have to look into the establishment of 24-hour universities and FET colleges so that we are able to accommodate the influx that is coming. For 2025 students are coming out in January next year. They must find space in higher education institutions. COSA is on the ground. We must be able to work together there and find a footing that talks to the young children and protection of rights of young children, because bullying has been the order of the day in most schools and any other ill disciplines that is there, and we are not found there, but only private NGOs and NPOs that are being vocal on the spaces that we should be vocal on. Ours is to unite beyond the banner of young people. Young people are not working. Also, we must be able to, as this summit, as we go out, to find a way of addressing the missing middle young people that are not in school, are not in working, but are just found here regularly, because those eagle minds are the devil's playground, and therefore, hence you will have a higher GPV, higher pregnancy rate, higher everything on that is not talking to the society that we foresee in the future. And those incomplete words,
can we now call upon Young Women's Desk to come forward and submit their remarks.
Comrades, my name is Nkanyezi Tabete, because I'm in grade 12. We do need space in institutions of higher learning because that is a space that I am going to next year. I come from the ANC Women's League Young Women's Desk, as appointed by the leadership of Honorable Minister Tolashe and Umam Nokuthula Nqaba, as an organizing part of the Women's League. And we would have discussed prior with the SG of the Youth League that we need to have a discussion on how the leagues of the ANC, as the Women's League and the Youth League, decide to engage each other in terms of advancing, of course, the current issues on gender politics and broader on that, on issues of youth. So, comrades, I made notes here, but I'm just going to scribble through them and just find what I think that I will be able to pass in these 5 minutes. But comrades, what I can say is that as the ANC, asikwazi ukusindwa umbobo wethu. We cannot promise people progressiveness. We can't promise people liberation and then say, no, Mara, this one was not my fault. This one was not my fault. In any political organization that is established now in this country. I come from the ANC Women's League Young Women's Desk, as appointed by the leadership of Honorable Minister Tolashe and Umam Nokuthula Nqaba, as an organizing part of the Women's League. And we would have discussed prior with the SG of the Youth League that we need to have a discussion on how the leagues of the ANC, as the Women's League and the Youth League, decide to engage each other in terms of advancing, of course, the current issues on gender politics and broader on that, on issues of youth. So, comrades, I made notes here, but I'm just going to scribble through them and just find what I think that I will be able to pass in these 5 minutes. But comrades, what I can say is that as the ANC, asikwazi ukusindwa umbobo wethu. We cannot promise people progressiveness. We can't promise people liberation and then say, no, Mara, this one was not my fault. This one was not my fault. In any political organization that is established now in this country, there is a trend, Comrade President, that you would have a DA. In Tshwane, that was the situation, where the DA has been presiding over that municipality for the longest time. But now it is as if everything was the fault of the ANC. That is the lash that we get of being the biggest movement on the continent and arguably even continentally. We really have the future of democratic movements and organization on our backs. And comrades, as young people of the PYA and extended and all members who are present here, we need to understand that we can't be putting the blame on anyone else but ourselves, but taking collective responsibility to correct and to chart a way forward. But comrades, as part of the aims and objectives of the Women's League of spearheading emancipation of women and society in general, promoting all-round development of women and help in building their confidence. Comrades, why am I saying this? I am saying this, issues such as your gender-based violence and exclusion in any part of society emanates from economic exclusion. Because if women are afforded the opportunities sorry, comrades, I sometimes stutter, but it's fine. Yes, Bess, thanks, Bess. But opportunities of education, opportunities of business. I am very glad, well, I am a fangirl of our progressive minister, Minister Stella Ndabeni, who has launched a women's fund of 30 million rands. And I believe that, comrades, these are the things that the Youth League and the Progressive Youth Alliance should be campaigning with. The NYDA that is led by Bess is an achievement of the Progressive Youth Alliance, and it should be claimed as such. We mustn't apologize for putting the views. If it's a tea party, it's a tea party, comrades. Because it can't be a meeting of elites and exclusion of genuine constituencies. Because it is. If it's a tea party, comrades. And if we are seen defending things that we should not be defending, that is where the Youth League is now going to be deemed as something irrelevant. So, comrades, as the Young Women's Desk, we are going to be part of this process. And comrades, with the student movement, as a recent graduate of a student movement, this is where we must come in and being strategic in approach. As young people, we have too much pressure on us, too much pressure that old people don't have. We dare not fail. We are too young to fail.
Comrades, intentionally, I've made sure that Contralesa speaks last.
I've never been into things that go hand in hand with politics. I strongly believe in, as an African child, as I call it a God, Ribadimu, Balifatilela Rona. We are the custodians of our land. And so I believe the only way for us to progress as a community, a society, as a people, it is to go back to our roots. It is to go back to the ways that our forefathers did. And from there, we get the blueprint as to how we should march forward. What I love about today is that I'm hearing everybody speaking in this room, and we all have issues that are pressing in each organization that we are representing. But one thing is that we are all for the people. I love that we put the needs of the people. We really unite as organizations and putting our differences aside to come together not for us, but for the people that we're leading. Vele, if it's not us, who is it gonna be? Rena le bana, rena le malapa, and each of us personally are facing challenges that we cannot really share with other people. But as a leader, I believe that instead of being the leader, be the leader that is willing to sacrifice in order for the people to eat, in order for our land to be restored in its generational wealth. Ribakosi, as our chair has stated right now, Ribakosi, it should show in everything that we do. It should show in our leadership, but it is the people that we represent. Thank you.
So now we are going to take a presentation from NYDA. Comrade Busisiwe Nxumalo will lead us in that presentation.
My name is Busisiwe Nandipha Nxumalo. I speak on behalf of the National Youth Development Agency. I just want to say, comrades, you know that recently the new board was appointed, and with this new collective, I can really say to you that it is very much inclusive of genders, regions, political backgrounds, peoples with disability, and the most important, the LGBTI community, of which myself am a part of. This is more than just a symbolic gesture. It is a clear message that every young person must see themselves in the leadership of their institutions and must also know that their voices matter. The challenge that our generation faces is extremely immense. It's unemployment, it's poverty, limited access to funding, and at times exclusions of decision-making platforms. But together with the PYA and all progressive formations, we are determined to ensure that no young person is left behind. This NYDA is not mine, it is your agency. It exists to provide the services that empower young people, from funding grant entrepreneurship, skills development, career guidance, and opportunities for education. But these services can only be changed if they are accessed, and that is why it is important for the PYA to be at the footprint of every campus in the rural areas, in townships, in villages, and working crucially hand in hand with the NYDA to ensure that young people can access these opportunities. Our call here is very simple. Let's work in hand to ensure that people, of all young people in this country, regardless of race, gender, disability, or sexual orientation, know that they are entitled to the services of the NYDA and they can always access them with dignity. Because when young people rise, South Africa rises. As the new board, we are very much committed to deepening inclusivity, strengthening accountability, and also expanding opportunities. We will be present in communities, in schools, and not just in offices and workplaces. Let us also remind ourselves that youth development is not a favor, it is a constitutional imperative. And as the PYA, with the history of struggle and leadership, needs to continue to drive this engine and this vision forward together with us in the NYDA. Together, let us ensure that young people are not just beneficiaries of this democracy, but they are also shaping the democratic and the developmental project. I thank you.
We will allow the minister to come to the front and address us on youth opportunities in her department and some of the work that she's doing to address challenges of young people in the country. We've seen your work, Mafako. We know your work, and we know that you are still to do more.
Comrades, we are meeting here today a progressive youth alliance that must take stock of the work that has been done since the advent of democracy. But now, knowing very well that though we're still faced with lots of political challenges, there's a biggest threat to your generation, the high levels of unemployment, an economy that refuses to be transformed, which therefore requires you to be active participants, not only focusing on voting and complaining on what does not happen in your own areas. Now, what opportunities are there is that you are there to understand the policies, you develop the policies. The things that we complain about, whether we're talking about the announcement and the gazetting by DTIC, those things are part of a policy formulation which requires you, comrades, to participate in the subcommittees of the ANC, in all the subcommittees, so that your voice is heard and you are able to make sure that before policies are finalized, you have made your own input in ensuring that you secure the interests of the constituency that you are living. You are again faced with a different challenge outside unemployment that may be a consequence of people who are tired of voting, who are not inspired to go and participate because indeed they feel like nothing much has changed for them. This therefore requires you to have a productive engagement on saying, how do we make sure that we bring back the young people that had registered in 2021, registered in high numbers, but could not go out and vote? In the previous elections, out of the 62% that registered, only 35% went out to vote. And we're talking margins of people between 18, 19, 20, and 24 that are not voting. And that's your direct constituency. What is it that you need to do differently in order to appeal to them? Because all the things that we're talking about here require your leadership in all sectors of life. South Africa is to host the F1, for example, in 2027. What is the PYA doing and saying in order to shape that, to make sure that FY hosting talks to young people's interests? And these are the discussions that we must have as we complain about what is not happening in the classroom or that is happening in the classroom or in the workplace or eLuthuli and everywhere else. But let's not lose sight of what we need to deal with to address the challenges that we're talking about. At the center of that is prioritizing education, but relevant education. Because many people do go to school and yet they are sitting at home, not able to find jobs, Not because jobs are not there, because I'm sure every day you see jobs are being advertised, but it talks to the relevance of what people have studied, which requires you to understand the era that you are leading in. What drives the economy? What are the skills gap that exist amongst your generation and your constituencies? And therefore be able to influence a direction that says, if we are saying we are in this revolution that is driven by technology, what becomes of the traditional qualifications and roles? We've been preaching this technology is here, is replacing us, but it is the reality. How many of us, as we advance the interest of people going to school, how many of us have taken interest in understanding the impact of artificial intelligence if we are not the ones that are really trying to understand and develop solutions that must solve the challenges that we are faced with? They said I'm here to talk about the opportunities in the department, but I felt it's important that I just lay those basics, which are important because the department I'm currently leading is a department that, according to the National Development Plan, has the responsibility to create 85 to 90% of jobs. It's the NDP, which says South Africa must create 11 million jobs by 2030, and 85 to 90% of those shall come from small enterprises, which means in every platform that you take, in every boardroom that you occupy, you ought to look at the impact of investment in small enterprises if we were to tackle the high unemployment rate that we are complaining about. When we talk about defunding the Youth League, we also look at defunding or disinvesting in state institutions that must be able to assist small enterprises so that they can create the jobs. So these go together. The challenges that we are faced with, the interest in understanding what needs to be done, but also understanding what is happening currently, so that we're able to really challenge the state and the ANC itself. But first, for us to be able to deliberate on those matters, we must know what are the existing policies. How are certain things undertaken? What are the procedures? So that you go and attack what seems not to work for what you want to achieve. I say this all the time, that those that came before us were wiser enough, DSG. They knew that it was apartheid system that discriminated against their parents, economy, and everything. But they knew for it to be effective, it was utilizing the law. And majority of them went and studied law to come back and challenge the law. And they defeated the apartheid system. They didn't sit and then just shout slogans. They had education that was irrelevant. They balanced, because for them to be able to defeat the system, you need to understand how the system works so that you break it piece by piece. And the unemployment rate that we are complaining about requires that level of understanding. How are we being excluded in our own economy? Government continues to pump lots of money in education, but what education is being produced by those universities that we have lots of people that are sitting at home? That today we talk about even those that are driving businesses, that they're not able to be sustainable. That to date we still talk about the lack of access to financing, in particular by Black, young, and women-owned businesses. So as you deliberate in everything else, I want you to really focus on those. Because when we put pressure on the critical things to say, we hear you, ANC president, we hear you, state president, and your ministers and all of that, you are saying you're going to be tackling unemployment. But the instruments that you are putting are not favoring the conditions on the ground. Because we can create instruments, but if the instruments are not responding to the challenges, you know, ufake fund, no one must apply or must qualify if they are blacklisted. Already, that's a high number of people that are rejected. Already have excluded those people. But unfortunately, the people who are blacklisted, they don't even participate in the policy development. So the people who are sitting there most of the time is desktop research. and what works in their ideal situation, not in the majority's ideal situation. So that's why I'm saying mine, as I'll be talking to the opportunities, because you are going to continuously being excluded if we don't challenge or we don't fight the right fight. We are a very small department with a huge task. Already I spoke about the number of jobs that have to be created. And again, even the Constitution does talk to the transformation of our economy dependent on small enterprises. I know most of the time when we talk about small enterprises, people who have not read the definition, they think of only the informal sector, which are mainly hawkers, the salons and all of that, which make lots of money, by the way. So here in South Africa, when we talk about small enterprises, we're talking about sectors, segments that go up to 1 billion rands, like the automotive. So if your annual turnover is around those money, you're still a small enterprise according to the legislation, the National Small Enterprise Act. So I want you to broaden the thinking when I'm referring to small enterprises, not only look at the person who owns a salon or a person who's selling in the stock, but think along the lines of the value chain that you see people who are participating meaningfully but excluding many other people in that sector. We provide financial support because businesses do need financial support. In the provision of the financial support, we then respond to different segments that you are responsible for. Because we are responsible from startups, cooperatives, which is a collective entrepreneurship, unlike what most people believe, that cooperatives are just meant for Abantube projects who are not into business. Cooperatives are businesses, it's just that it's collective entrepreneurship. That's why you see the likes of ABSA, how they're formulated, Old Mutual, many of them including AVBOB, because they came together as entrepreneurs, benza stokvels, and established cooperatives out of that, but towards financial inclusion and the profits that they must make. So we provide that support. It goes, it's different, as I said, it's different per segment. You apply at SITFA, the Small Enterprise Development and Finance Agency. You don't apply through myself. I remain the minister that makes the policy and make sure that I allocate budget as I do. So in the budget processes, we had launched, again, the Women's Fund that the Young Women's Desk mentioned, in responding to dealing with the challenge of exclusion, of financial exclusion of women-owned businesses. So the fund, we have started it at 300 million rands this year. We are increasing next year to 700 million. Of course, we're trying to crowd pool, even from the private sector. I just want to focus on the marginalized interventions that we're targeting. We've also seed-funded a fund for the Youth Entrepreneurship Fund. Again, we've started it at 300 million rands. It's going to go up to 1.5 billion by year 2027, not because we are going to conference, but because of the financial planning of government. I'm highlighting just these two because they talk directly to your interest. We have different interventions for people living with disabilities, which is called Amavulandlela. We also have financial instruments for those that fought for our freedom in Nyamazana Fund, because we tend to forget about the work that was done by those that came before us, those that did not even get an opportunity to become ministers, councillors, and everything that we are today, but they have better skills in terms of trade. So there's a particular funding that goes up to 15 million rands. I mention this because you are leading a constituency, most of you, that is unemployed. And every time you're talking about the importance of financing ideas, you want to go and ask for money, but from who if you're not building entrepreneurs yourselves? If you don't understand the importance of balancing that, to say you need to support or build your own entrepreneurs that must be able to finance your revolution so that you safeguard the ideology that you belong to. Otherwise, you're going to get wrong sponsors and funders. And then all of this will be diluted. That is why you must always take interest in who does business and how in your own country, including supporting those that have a similar ideology like yourselves. The business infrastructure support advert is out there. It's the finance that we provide to organize businesses, organized in the sense that you must be a group of entrepreneurs. And we fund up to 100, many millions, depending on the need. And this is what most people take for granted. And big business have learned the trick. To say, Minister, we have this factory, we want you to open this and that because we are subcontracting them. But at the end of the day, it is government that pays for that. You are nowhere to be found. In every area, whether you're in NUM, you are talking about the PPE, you are from SATU, the T-shirts and everything, there's an economy that surrounds you. When you go home to eat, who has supplied, who has benefited from the food that you're eating? People talk or complain about the influx of illegal or undocumented foreigners in our country, but reality is that we are the ones that are offering space, contra lesser. We give land to undocumented foreigners. We rent out our properties as South Africans. We buy services from them. So that's why I'm saying we need to, at some point, be able to have a discussion with the realities and then identify what is that we are doing. The second aspect that we focus on is the provision of non-financial support. When you go to apply for this finance, they will tell you you need 1, 2, 3 in terms of the criteria. And most of those, they come at a huge cost. You must be SABS approved, you must be this and that, registered with this, and they come at a cost. This is what people refer to as red tape. And again, red tape is based on regulations, policies, and legislation. Most people, they just stand up and say, red tape, when are you gonna end red tape? It's not like that. We have identified a minimum of 27 pieces of legislations that are prohibiting meaningful participation of small enterprises in the economy and therefore excluding them from participating in certain sectors. And these are the discussions that we must have. Interrogate the law because you are political structures. You deal with politics. Every piece of legislation, policy, and everything, you must scrutinize the impact. When you say, I can't open a hair salon because I'm a law graduate or I'm a whatever graduate, understand the economics of the hair salon. When you become very important that you can't open a spaza shop, when I say young people open spaza shops, you don't understand because it's meant for people who did not go to school. Understand the economics and the value chain of the spaza shop, that there's a small scale farmer that must be supported. There's somebody who's processing, and you can enter in that value chain and therefore be able to transform the economy that we're talking about. Not only looking at consuming what comes out of the spaza shop or the hair salon. And when we deal with transformation, it's not because we're excluding others, we're not discriminating, but we're dealing with a constitutional preamble that talks to redressing the injustices in our country. So understanding that constitution, including the aspect that talks to South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Everyone has a right to trade, which again, the PYA has been missing in action in articulating those. What do we mean by those clauses? Because now they're being hijacked by other people for their selfish interest. You are better placed, you know, you read this document, you politic about them every day. How do we link those founding principles, those particular clauses, to the realities that you are faced with and the challenges that we go through? When we talk about expropriation without compensation, what does it mean for business people? Because you will go, without land, people are not able to trade. So how do we begin to define, when government says we are passing this legislation, how do we link that with the economic freedom that we want to achieve? To say, if this is what you are saying, therefore it means you must set aside in terms of the spatial planning of the municipality, because you will be participating as the PYA, set aside some land for small enterprises so that they're not taxed the same way. Make sure that there are services that are offered to them at a discounted rate, just like you do in the IDs where you put big businesses, because they enjoy lots of incentives on tax basis and everything. But what about the small enterprises? And I'm focusing on small enterprises because it is your constituency. It is your opportunity to change and transform the economy. When you are saying we must go back and reindustrialize, what does that mean in terms of the politics that you are driving? How are we going to industrialize? Are we just going to open up and say, come, any investor, come and invest, and then we are looking for jobs, therefore people must come and work in the factory? Or we want people to focus on producing? And how do we encourage people to produce? To own the factories, to beneficiate, as you say, without proper instruments that enabling that. So as you put all these bold, important points that you put and resolutions that you take, you must also make sure that you contribute on the instruments that must give effect to that. There is lack of investment in research and development, including innovation in this country. We want to hear your voice. I'm just triggering you to say, how do we make sure that we industrialize? We do have instruments that talk to the small manufacturing support that we provide to smaller enterprises. You have a responsibility to make sure that we break the monopolies and build a dynamic youth-led economy. But as I said, we will never lead that economy if we don't understand. What kind of policymakers must we produce as the PYA that must have an understanding of what drives the economy? Ngoba, we may want to be hell-bent on protecting BBBEE. Is it relevant in the era of artificial intelligence? Is it relevant in this era? What is that we need to tweak and make sure that we build capabilities amongst our people so that they can be able to address the challenges that you are faced with? Now, on the business development support that I spoke about, we have established centers for entrepreneurship and rapid incubation in majority of TVETs. We have established incubation centers in majority of universities and in some townships, to a point that we have about 121 incubators throughout the country. We are doing that because we recognize that young people have great ideas and are innovative, but they don't know where to go for them to be nurtured. And business ideas have to be nurtured so that they can take them to greater levels of putting them in the market. That's why the incubation centers are there. And very few young politicians participate in those, even at school, SASCO and all those. There's young people, there's a school economy, whether you go to whatever institution. But most of those entrepreneurs that are young, they're excluded. And that's why we said we must put them in those centers so that we engage with the universities, the TVET colleges, and the other societal matters, societal organizations that are out there. We're also looking at promoting student entrepreneurship at high school level. COSAS would love to partner with yourselves. Driving entrepreneurship at a tender age. And all the other things. How do we grow that to a person that must grow and become big like SASCO? Because they started small. How do we begin to think and balance what we know, what we are studying, but also exploit the opportunity that we are members of the PYA that has a majority party that is in government, and therefore we can influence those. We need to deal with the lack of structural transformation to diversify our own economy, and also, comrades, to deal with our own inability to address economic inequality, our own inability. That all the time we want to be apologetic when we have to take bold decisions because we don't want to upset certain people. It is you that are young that can be able to champion that. So you can express your own views, but collective approach is what is important. When we say the PYA has agreed on 1, 2, 3, or the PYA is concerned about 1, 2, 3, you go to the economic transformation cluster of the ANC, you participate there, you challenge the economic plan of the country. You go to the social transformation cluster, you challenge what is happening in the social transformation cluster, the kind of education that is driven at higher institutions of learning, at basic education. Does it talk to current challenges in our economy? We have the Cooperative Support Development Program that you can also share with your own members, as I spoke about collective entrepreneurship. That's grant-based. The ones that I said, they belong to business development support. They all grant-based. Where you go and get a loan on blended financing is small manufacturing, 30% grant and others. But the CSDP, the business infrastructure support and others, they are all grant-based. We will be working with Comrade Budi, Comrade Spudler, to make sure that, as I said, we must also tap into the new opportunities that are presented by the new economies in the energy space. Just energy, we are fighting for the space of small enterprises, but we need you, because you shouldn't just become installers or encourage your people to be installers. There must also be manufacturers of the solar panels and the other things that we're talking about, which is why we are partnering, the three of us, to look at the training, the skilling aspect, the building of the business aspect, and then taking to the market side, because Comrade Spudler is there. And this is one commitment that we've made. On the digital space, again, we are talking about giving an opportunity, especially to young and women-owned businesses, to own digital infrastructure, because we know that very few that are owning digital infrastructure, especially black in our own country. So we said we are incentivizing that. We've put a budget aside. We continue to engage with other partners to come to the party so that you can, as you talk about data costs and everything, data must fall, cost reduction and all the English, you know that you are opening up an opportunity for young and women-owned businesses to own the infrastructure, because when it is them that can own the infrastructure, because it is mainly young people and women that are using the data for all the services that we're talking about. Therefore, you need to make sure that they own the infrastructure, and the support is there for those that are interested in those. But lastly, as we participate, we know that we're part of the continent, of the global politics, with all the things that are happening. We've got to make sure that we diversify our markets. Those are new opportunities, which is why we have the Small Business Export Development Support Program, to say, okay, you don't have a market, or you have products that you have, then we're taking you to other countries so that you can be able to trade just like you are supposed to trade. We've supported a number of businesses within our budget. I know abantu bathi hayi suka iphile mali. If you have a 2 billion budget, it means you will support people with 2 billion rands. You can't, even if the need is 350 billion rands, as it is said, that South Africa has a credit gap of 350 billion rands, but the reality is that government has only allocated 2 billion rands. If you are saying you want to occupy the economic spaces, you've got to fight for government to fund the developmental agenda. Because if you are all referred to the commercial banks, no, they don't have a responsibility to finance the developmental agenda. They will increase their interest, they will be charging you, but if you are challenging the state, not only as the biggest procurer, but that you have DFIs, these DFIs must be able to respond to the challenges that are faced by our country, and therefore open up spaces in terms of increasing financial support so that young women and other entrepreneurs, black in particular, may be able to enjoy trade and participate meaningfully. For more information, you know where to get me. The website has all the information. Please don't call me and ask me where do you apply for the BIS. You follow us on our social media page, you go to the website because you are young, you get the information that you apply. Then when you are stuck, you can call me for intervention.
We're now going to take a presentation from Comrade Bhuti Manamela, Comrade Minister of Higher Education. Is going to be sharing with us the work that is doing in his department and some of the work that I know that our comrades here, we've been interacting a lot with the work that the department is doing. So it's very close to our hearts. We have an agenda of industrializing. So in that agenda of industrialization and a beneficiation of mineral resources, we will need skills that are relevant for us to industrialize. Like Comrade Stella said, that you are not going to manage the revolution for economic freedom if we are not going to take a cohort of young people to training on economy. If you want to deal with law, we must have cohorts of young people that are dealing with law, so that when you are dealing with these questions, you have experts in the room that are dealing with each and every question that you want to address. So now, right now, we will allow the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Comrade Butima Namela, to come and make his presentation.
I think over the last few, well, not few days, I think over the last 5-6 weeks, we've had engagement with internal and external stakeholders within the higher education system, the PSET. We also met, I think, with the Progressive Youth Alliance to try and get to understand as to, according to them, what is the framing of the problem in the post-school education and training sector, and what are the things that we need to do agently in order to fix, some of those issues that they've identified as part of the challenges. And without exception, most of the, if not all of the structures that we met, identified several issues as challenges. Most of the changes in the post-school education and training sector were either necessitated by planning or most of those changes happened as a result of pressure. So if we look at the legislations that we introduced in the early period of democracy, those were obviously in line with what has always been the aspirations of the ANC in terms of education policy. But some of the changes were also forced. For instance, from the early protests by the student movement influencing policy legislation, and that some of the current turbulences in the post-school education and training system were a result of either haphazard planning or lack thereof. Yes, you have the National Development Plan, you have the post-school education and training plan 2030, but that we need a much longer view. So as is a period now of assessing the National Development Plan and its impact, and also looking into the future, that the post-school education and training sector need to take advantage of this and internally look at where we are and what's the long view. Thirdly, that we need to look at the size and shape. I mean, every year we have the spaces that are available in the system cannot cope with the supply from basic education. To the progress made in terms of technology necessitate that we need to reposition the system to take advantage of all of these changes. And that has an impact on the size and shape of the system. The last re-engineering of the size and shape of the system planned was about 20 years ago with the merger of universities of technology, and I think that was also followed by the mergers of TVETs. And we have big universities, smaller TVET colleges, and even smaller community colleges. So part of the challenges would be to direct resources, which then helps in facilitating inclusion on the basis of race, on the basis of gender, and also on the basis of disability. And so over the last 30 years, the system has been representative in terms of access, but also in terms of throughput. So those are the things which we got to appreciate as part of where the system is and what needs to be done. And so how do we use the next 4 years in looking at what should immediately be dealt with and what could be dealt with in the long term? And I think the comrades from the student movement will appreciate the fact that the most urgent task would be for us to fix our department, to make sure that it is responsive and that it provides leadership of the system. Secondly, the most other urgent thing is to fix the NSFAS. Yes, we are on a monthly basis, paying about 800,000 students, their allowances and their tuition, but there are still challenges. And I think some of you are aware of the, the growing funding gap in student funding, and how unsustainable the current NSFAS is. In the first year of its implementation, there was a huge injection, and I think of about 5 billion. In the second year, about 20 billion injected. But in the third year, when the participation rate has increased and it was almost being applied universally, there was a shortfall of about 2.5 billion. That shortfall has doubled, and now it has quadrupled. And I think you've read in the news something which we're trying to sort out with the Minister of Finance. But the reality is that no matter how revolutionary the decision in 2018 seemed, it was reckless and irresponsible because it was not cushioned with measures to make sure that it becomes sustainable. And what this effectively means is that if we are to accommodate each and every student who graduates from matric, we will have to look at about 65 billion rand per annum increasing from the state, which is essentially unsustainable. Which would also mean that our funding for post-school education and training system is significantly composed of student funding. And so it means that we'll have to go back to the drawing board. How do we make sure that student funding becomes sustainable? How do we make sure that it does not cripple the entire system? How do we also make sure that we do not compromise funding, particularly for young people who are from poor and working class background? With what has now evolved, what are the other innovative measures that we need to put into place to make sure that we diversify student funding, so that student funding must be sustainable? These are still the early days of that kind of a discussion, but I think the Progressive Youth Alliance need to help us think through how, what type of reforms and how do we have a sustainable, student funding model with all the other competing priorities that, government has. But part of fixing the NSFAS is not only about the long-term plans, it's also about what we do into the short term to make sure that there are proper systems that are in place, proper governance machinery, but also a clear delineation of responsibilities in terms of what, the policy arm, which is us, and the technical arm, which is NSFAS itself. There's been very radical proposals, some including the fact that we need to do away completely with the NSFAS and find new ways of distributing student funding. And I think given the, the imminent threat around the sustainability of student funding, we will have to make sure that there are no holy cows in the discussion around student reform. We have to build a system that talks to each other. We have to make sure that there is clear articulation lines, from being at a community college, graduating there either into the world of work or into a TVET college or into a university. And in between all of those systems and through the National Qualifications Framework ladder. So every component and, sector education and training authorities. I think there's a huge debate now, necessary, which is, I think, also helping to push us in the right direction towards introducing reforms. But the major measure of success of the post-school education and training system is for it to be able to articulate within itself. So that's basically that. Now, From the Progressive Youth Alliance, what would we obviously expect? One, which is Asian, the point that I just ended with, help us drive the discussion around a sustainable student funding model, and also helping us fix the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, governance and its operations. I know that some in the PYA have raised some issues around governance, the constitution of the board. So that's a discussion we can have, separately. But I think what's important, yes, we'll have to deal with issues around representativity, but we also have to deal with issues around stability, in the sector. Secondly, we will be looking at a suite of legislation for changes. This has been delayed, some of them as old as 2019. For instance, the Central Application Service, the Higher Education Act itself, the Continuing Education and Training Act, and so on. And some of the proposed changes, if pulled through, would really help us make a mark. For instance, the Central Application Service Bill is about making sure that students don't pay a lot to multiple institutions when they apply, but also to organize the system in terms of participation and so on and so forth. So it gives us that centralized role, and it helps us to have, have some leverage in who and what do they get taught in our institutions. There's going to be a big debate about autonomy, yes, but I think for us is that all these legislations have to reinforce our commitment to principles of access and success, and also the establishment of a single system. So we're going to need, the PYA to support us in that regard and to help us drive this discussion. Thirdly, beyond legislation, then the discussion around size and shape. And so your contribution is also going to be very crucial. When I met with the secretariat of the PYA, I said to them, for instance, there's a lot of violence happening in our institutions. Investigations that are happening, some of them very little having to do with what the role of a university or of a TVET college is. Most of it having to do with who got which tender, and so on. And the overt imbalance of the academic and non-academic staff ratio, where you have support staff, which is administration, being larger than the academic staff. So institutions of higher learning must be places to teach, not to build infrastructure, and so on and so forth. Yes, they may have that responsibility, but it cannot be that the core of your human resource is about managing, the administration and running of the institution, and very little to do with research, knowledge, production, learning and teaching. And so those are some of the things we will have to look at. The fact that there is a veer towards humanities and social sciences, because the pipeline from basic education is somewhat becoming narrower. And it's easier and cheaper for universities and TVET colleges to teach human resource, important as it is, than to teach engineering. The withdrawal of business in the skills space, and now making a big debate, discussion around the fact that they want, any form of levies that's directed towards training to be called off so that they get tax subsidies. So those are the agent things that I thought I should present here, for consideration and discussion. But we, through this phase, which is about policy, which is about reshaping, the size and shape of the system, with biasness towards your technical vocational education and training, but also a space where we'll have to rethink our student funding. I think we'll really need an active and vibrant Progressive Youth Alliance that we can always rely on to help shape the ideas that ultimately makes what our post-school education and training system should be. Thank you very much.
For the revolution that we are waging now, as this generation of young people, we also want to be equipped with strategies and tactics of the movement on how to deal with all these other problems that we are faced with, how to approach them and how to tackle them. So we're now going to call to the podium Comrade Joel Nechitenze to come and give a presentation on strategy and tactics.
And my understanding of this summit is that you are trying to align your strategic posture as the PYA, your organizational tasks and program of action. You all know, in terms of social demographics, young people constitute about 40% of the population. They straddle all classes and strata in society. First and foremost, young people are amongst the primary beneficiaries of democracy and the cause of social transformation. For instance, we no longer have corporal punishment. But on a serious note, the quality of life of the youth is reflected in many indicators in terms of how it has improved. Literacy rates, about 100%. Number of students in tertiary institutions, African students now are about 75%, compared to less than 50% in 1994. There are ebbs and flows in terms of national mood, but young people are still the most optimistic in society about future prospects. Of course, there's the dynamic of exclusion and marginalization felt most keenly by the youth. Majority are unemployed, and so we have not been able as a society fully to take advantage of the demographic dividend, the so-called youth bulge. So those things that we talk about in the strategy and tactics document, that young people are the lightning rod for positive disruptive change, especially during moments of inertia and excessive risk aversion, cannot be fully expressed when young people are not fully integrated into the economy. The danger of that weakness is that the inverse of a demographic dividend can start to predominate. When young people feel abandoned and marginalized, they can be mobilized in pursuit of social regression. Vigilantes against vulnerable groups. Now, in my approach, I will proceed from what I think is our common understanding, that all of human history is one of class struggle. And to quote Marx and his colleagues, that class struggle results either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. How does this relate to the ANC as a liberation movement and the National Democratic Revolution? You'll be aware that the ANC long time ago adopted a Marxist methodology to the understanding of society. And on that basis, it came to the conclusion that the national democratic society that we pursue should be the antithesis of apartheid colonialism. It should eradicate national oppression. It should eradicate super exploitation, and it should eradicate patriarchy. To the extent that exploitation as such, as distinct from super exploitation, would persist in a national democratic society, it would then behove those who believe in a classless society, such as COSATU and the SACP, to take that struggle further. Otherwise, in the current phase, the ANC seeks to unite the majority of society, including black workers, the middle strata, and entrepreneurs, in pursuit of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous society. And I characterize this as democracy with profound social content, with the best attributes of a developmental state and social democracy. And when the ANC tried to be very practical on these theoretical issues, you'll see that in the strategy and tactics document. It said that if we were able to attain the objectives that are contained in the National Development Plan, including unemployment of about 6% and lower, a skilled population, a capable developmental state, and so on, we would have achieved the core elements of a national democratic society. Today, we live in a capitalist world order. But what is interesting is that that world order has got remarkable capacity for renewal and self-renewal and regeneration. It has created major advances in science and technology. The fourth industrial revolution, which combines human and machine capabilities, and many things that can improve the human condition. But those technologies, in the inverse, can worsen social inequality, and they lend themselves to destructive military applications and intelligence activities, what some call surveillance capitalism, which limit human freedoms. And as we can see today, capitalism and liberal democracy have given birth to what is called plutocracy. That is the unashamed rule by the rich and openly corrupt. Social inequality is worsening, and to mask this reality, the ruling class and the political elites are mobilizing the working class and the poor around the politics of narrow identity. What is worrying is that even those who belong to left social democratic parties seem to have been co-opted by the logic of neoliberalism and militarism. You look at countries like Germany and France, the left has been decimated. You look at the UK, yes, the Labour Party is in government, but it seems to be directionless, trying to stem its decline by what I refer to as classless identity politics. In terms of geopolitics, we may be heading towards a major war premised on what some refer to as the Thucydides trap. This is when an incumbent hyperpower feels threatened, and therefore it will goad the rising one to war. It happens with Germany and the UK, and now it might happen with the United States and China. In the strategy and tactics document, we argue the world is characterized by what we call primary unipolarity. Why? Because, yes, you can refer to China and Cuba, but essentially the world is dominated by the capitalist system. But beyond that, if you were to look at military strength, the strength of the United States is equal to the military power of the next eight military powers combined. So you take all the 8, China, Russia, UK, France, and all of them, and combine them, they are still below the power of the United States. That is why we say primary unipolarity. But we say the other character of the global environment is secondary multipolarity, because various centers of power are starting to emerge, some trying to be autonomous of the US, some trying to challenge it. You can refer to the EU, to BRICS, and all kinds of regional entities. So you'll ask the question, why do I refer to classless identity politics? It is because the very rich are trying to corral the working people behind reactionary causes. They use immigration, for instance, as a scapegoat. We will campaign as progressives against misogyny or hatred of women, but the extreme right invokes what is called misandry, which is hatred of men. Strangely, this is what resulted in unprecedented large numbers of Black and Latino young men voting for Trump in the last election, because they mobilized on the basis that this campaign around gender equality is marginalizing you as young men. And perhaps the point needs to be made. When we fight against patriarchy, we need to ensure that young men are also involved in that, in order not to create that impression that forging gender equality is in fact a challenge and marginalization of young men. But I was raising the issue of classless identity politics in order to remind us of what Lenin said in 1913, and I quote, "People always have been foolish victims of deception and self-deception in politics. And they always will be until they have learned to seek out the interests of some class or other behind all moral, religious, political, and social phrases, declarations, and promises." It is in this context, I think, that we should view the challenge that we are facing as South Africa in relation to the interaction with the US administration. There are many reasons that have been posited around why this administration seems to hate us so much. The ICJ Gaza genocide case, relations with China, BRICS, and so on, all those are relevant. But I would argue that one of the most fundamental issues is that we are seen by the United States and other right-wingers as what I refer to as the day incarnate. You know the expression devil incarnate. DEI incarnate in what sense? DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion, which this administration of the US hates with a passion. And because we're trying to implement that in South Africa, and if we succeed, that will also be seen as an encouragement to all peoples who are marginalized across the world, including Black Americans and Latinos. They see South Africa as a threat in that regard. And so we will be required, we are being pressurized to abandon our very essence as a post-colonial democracy, which pursues all generations of human rights, including economic and social rights, as well as gender rights. How should the progressive youth in South Africa respond to this global conjuncture, as well as the domestic challenges that we face? In terms of methodology, I will use two instances from historical moments when the ANC faced existential challenges. Firstly, the decline of the 1930s and 1940s, early 1940s, when the Mandelas and the Limbedes and others, who by the way were in their 20s and 30s, intervened to revive the ANC. And secondly, the unguided drift of the late 1960s, especially after the collapse of the Wankie and Sipolilo campaigns, when Chris Hani and his peers, who were in their 20s, by the way, precipitated the review that led to the Morogoro Conference and the movement's renewal. There were three levels at which young people in that period, when the ANC was facing existential challenges, there were those three levels at which they intervened. The first level is on strategy. In the 1940s, the Limbedes and others coined what they called the National Liberatory Creed of the ANC, of African nationalism. In the 1960s, building up to Morogoro, they challenged the strategic approach of the ANC, which led to the iconic 1969 Morogoro Strategy and Tactics document. The second level of intervention by young people was on tactics. 1949, they initiated the Program of Action, which saw to militant actions of the 1950s. After Morogoro, the Revolutionary Council was set up, and it led to the revival of the 1970s and 1980s. The third level at which young people intervened was on organizational work and issues of leadership. 1949, when they attended that conference of the ANC, they ensured that many of the leaders of the Youth League were elected onto the NEC, the Mandelas, the Tambos, and the others. And similarly, in the 1970s, after Morogoro, the senior leadership could not but co-opt the likes of Chris Hani, Thabo Mbeki, and others onto the NEC, the Revolutionary Council, and later the PMC, the Political Military Council. I'm saying all these things because I think similar interventions are currently required. At all these three levels, strategy, tactics, and organizational work, and the PYA must be at the forefront of that renewal. I won't go into the exercise of describing the challenges that we currently face in terms of electoral performance, social transformation, the unguided drift in societal and organizational renewal, and so on. What I will do is to select 10 themes, very briefly, of what I would refer to as catalytic interventions that can help us emerge from the current rut. The first one, theme 1, is what I refer to as our contextual presentism. It's a tendency that has taken root in much popular discourse today. And so because we face many challenges as a nation, people go to the extent of saying very courageously or bravely that nothing has changed since 1994. Yes, many things could have been done faster and better, but to discount the post-colonial advances is to question the very utility of the liberation struggle. Today, as we celebrate this year the 70th anniversary of the Congress of the People and the injunction in the Freedom Charter that the people must govern, we can say with confidence that the attainment of democracy was not a fleeting mirage. And as argued earlier, young people are amongst the major beneficiaries of social transformation. What worries me is that this are contextual presentism. It's quite perplexing when it comes from those we have deployed in state institutions and those who are in the leadership of the alliance, who have become experts at explaining how bad things are. If you want to be acknowledged as mastering the expertise of governance, describe how bad things are, rather than focusing on explaining the concrete interventions that will make to improve the situation. It has almost become tradition amongst our leaders to do this, and it needs to be discouraged. The second theme, it's about two economies of the colony and the metropolis. Why? Because South Africa is a colonial economy, or elements of that persist, because black people were denied the opportunity to have assets. Blacks and women were denied entrepreneurial skills. They were meant to provide cheap labor and so on. Now, the challenge that we face is that that first economy, the advanced one, is chugging along, although with low rates of growth. And it's absorbing sections of the black community, skilled workers, the middle strata, and so on. But the majority of black people remain excluded. One of the critiques that has been given is that in our economic policies, sometimes we seem to be focusing on creating employment opportunities for unemployed workers we wish we have, rather than unemployed workers that we actually have, who are unskilled and semi-skilled. When we talk about economic growth and creation of economic opportunities, we should not just focus on the first economy. We need to look also at the colony. What do we mean by this, and what kind of interventions are required? For those who have studied the National Development Plan, you will know that it argues that within a period of some 15 years, you can create 1 million additional jobs in agriculture alone within 15 years. If you do certain things that are elaborated in the NDP, most of these are not being implemented. The other intervention for these unskilled and semi-skilled workers is low-end manufacturing, including through special economic zones and so on. But these currently are not appropriately configured, and they are not premised on diverse trade, especially with the African continent. The other intervention, a comprehensive focus on micro and informal enterprises, which would dramatically expand economic opportunities for the marginalized to become entrepreneurs and improve their conditions. Theme 3, it's dealing with social inequality. And by the way, I need to make the point here that social inequality is decreasing between races, black and white, but it is increasing within the black community, because arising out of that would also be the question, where does this leadership assembled here come from in terms of classes and strata? Are we there at the top, or do we find ourselves integrated with the marginalized? Why is this issue of social inequality important? There's very interesting research that has been done. I think the book is called The Spirit Level, which says that indicators such as violent crime, the size of the prison population, drug use, mental illness, teenage pregnancy, and so on, are much worse in societies that have got high levels of income inequality. Even if these societies might be ranked at the same level as those that have got lower inequality. Tanzania, for instance, in terms of overall wealth, it's poorer than South Africa. But you won't find the same levels of violent crime, proportion of the prison population and so on in Tanzania as you would find in South Africa. So it's not so much a function of poverty. It's a function of social inequality. That is why, for instance, violent crime in South Africa is comparable to countries, some countries in Latin America, which also have got high levels of inequality. How do you address social inequality? There are many things. Economic growth, education and skills development, employee and community share ownership schemes, income policy that deals with a minimum wage, but also income differentials within enterprises. And in South Africa, we also have to address a very unique phenomenon, which is the apartheid tax on the poor, which continues up to today. What is that tax? The spatial settlement patterns. And our housing policies since 1994 have not done much to undermine those spatial settlement patterns. We are building these houses far away from areas of economic opportunity. And so, workers spend up to 40% of their wages on transport. It's a hidden apartheid tax on the poor. Theme 4 is about black capitalists and construction of a national democratic society. We know what the Freedom Charter says. All people shall have equal rights to trade where they choose, to manufacture, enter all trades, and so on. The corollary of this is that the democratic state must encourage the emergence of a cohort of black capitalists, what some refer to as the black capitalist class. We should not be shy to acknowledge this, because we're actually doing it. Because you cannot have a racially equitable capitalist system without this black capitalist class. That level of leveling up is a necessity. The problem is when this form of empowerment is projected as the totality of social transformation. And when those who oppose BEE argue that BEE has not reduced the unemployment rate. Of course, broad-based empowerment must include skills training, positions in management, employee share ownership schemes, and so on. But the weakness of BEE is not that it has benefited a few black capitalists. It is when those black beneficiaries do not themselves pursue broad-based empowerment, including employee share ownership schemes. And some of them participate in these schemes only to acquire wealth and status. They avoid the coal face of financial trade and manufacturing and industrial activity. And many of them, especially in the recent period, end up cashing out their shares to pursue sedentary lifestyles in Dubai and the French Riviera. Theme 5 is about race, national unity, and social cohesion. Of course, the flag, the national anthem, and celebration of sporting victories are important. And we also have interactions among the multiracial elites, which is mainly cultural co-option of the black and upper strata, middle and upper strata. Those things are important as indicators of positive sentiment, but they will be fleeting and inconsequential if we don't address social inequity. And the quarrel around race in South Africa, which persists up to today, is about material self-interest. That political compact of the early 90s sought to encourage patience amongst the oppressed for an orderly process of social transformation and a commitment amongst the beneficiaries of apartheid to contribute to healing the divisions of the past. But the guts to fight back, which started with the Democratic Party, now the Democratic Alliance, undermined that political compact, and they continue today in opposing that necessary redistribution, which was part of the 1994 compact. They are aligning with racists and right-wingers, even across our borders, in order to undermine transformation. Theme number 6, it's about the national question and narrow ethnic identity. It is deeply concerning that the mobilization within the black community on the basis of ethnic and language identity is finding fertile ground. You'll remember the quote from Lenin: people will always be foolish victims of deception and self-deception if they don't look at the matter of class. We saw in the 2024 elections, there were dog whistles, like whispers, around ethnicity in KwaZulu-Natal. in Gauteng, in Mpumalanga, there were these dog whistles amongst especially the Afrikaans-speaking colored community in the Cape provinces. The MK Party and the Patriotic Alliance, is it Patriotic Alliance, deliberately did that, jettison class and use narrow identity to win people over to your side. But let's ask ourselves the question, how is this possible 30 years into democracy? Is it opportunistic mobilization or personality cults? But if it's opportunism, one can make the point that opportunism cannot thrive where there's no opportunity. The emergence of the South African nation, and at whose foundation should be the unity of the African people, has got two contradictory tendencies that we need to theorize and find a way of managing. What are they? Quite correctly, we are urging the oppressed, the erstwhile oppressed, to take pride in their languages, in their cultures, in their traditions. It's correct. On the other hand, we also seek, quite correctly, to promote the overarching identity of being South African. Maybe starting with being proud of being black. How do we deal with this dialectical, should we call it negation of the negation? So we climb to a higher level of managing this issue. We find a synthesis so that we can defeat those demons that Pixlika Isaka Seme referred to, those animosities, those issues that mobilize the earlier generations, in fact, to form the ANC. Theme number 7 is state legitimacy and authority. For us to succeed with transformation, the state must be legitimate. It should exercise authority as the ultimate bearer of arms and enforcer of law and order. But for it to be able to do so, it must have popular legitimacy. And critical in that regard is the integrity and legitimacy of state security agencies. I'm raising this because, as you know, recently we have seen these strange incidents with machinations within the South African Police Service in particular, where the hunters are becoming the hunted and the other way around, in what I would call a dizzying display of smoke and mirrors. I think we need to be vigilant as citizens, because as others have warned, we may find ourselves hoodwinked to use democracy to destroy democracy. Theme number 8 is about organizational renewal of the ANC. We know of the many proposals that have been made, proceeding from the understanding that there cannot be a revolution without a revolutionary organization. This relates to functionality of branches, their organic link with communities, quality of members, of cadres, of leaders, and so on. My own view is that the campaign around political education, and the foundational course in particular, should be commended. Tens of thousands have gone through the modules. There are criticisms that in some instances is tick box exercises. But the fact of the matter is that the movement has embarked on one of the most extensive political education campaigns in its history. There are proposals that have been made, and I suppose this can also apply to the Youth League, that maybe members should be barred, prevented from assuming leadership positions, from being selected as delegates to conferences at all levels, if they've not gone through the foundational course. My view is that it should be seriously considered as an incentive. Theme 9 is about leadership selection and what I would refer to as the ANC's ultra-democracy. Over the years, we have grappled with the question and system of developing career pathing and promoting cadres to positions of responsibility. We even introduced criteria, I think it was in 2012, where we said political acumen, ethical conduct, and academic qualifications should be used to assess whether people qualify to assume leadership positions. But still, the eye of the needle is not narrow enough to prevent miscreants from squeezing through. In my view, in part, this is because of ultra-democracy in the ANC, which lends itself to the utilization of all manner of machinations, including money, to ascend to positions of leadership. In my view, there is much that we can learn from social democratic parties in Scandinavia, for instance, and former liberation movements like Frelimo and Chama Chama Pinduzi, especially on the management of leadership succession. You can study from documents on how they do this, but with Chama Chama Pinduzi and I think Frelimo, for instance, if you want to stand as president, you pronounce that I want to stand. And then they've got an electoral commission that looks at your CV, that looks at your ethical standing, at your qualifications, and then decide whether you qualify. And the remaining ones then go around the country to branches of Chama Chama Pinduzi, explaining to the membership why they think they qualify to be the leader of the organization or the party. Something that we need to start thinking about. And I'm raising this because personally I'm supremely concerned that the succession battles leading up to 2027 have got the potential to deal a fatal blow to the ANC as an organization. But the point that I'm making is that the ANC has to boldly deal with this issue. The last theme is on the tripartite alliance in the conduct of revolution. Both the ANC and the SACP appreciate that any pursuit of a socialist society has to traverse via a national democratic society. A revolution that the SACP should influence. Historically, the SACP has sought to inject a class approach, that Marxist approach that I was talking about, into the content of the ANC's approach. But at the same time, the ANC's own creed helped to inject the necessary national content into the party's ideological posture. In the years leading up to and just after the formation of the SACP, there were some who were saying that you need only to organize white workers for a socialist revolution. It's later when the CPSA started to call for a black republic. So that bi-directional osmosis is fundamental to the depth of the national democratic revolution. So many of us are worried about the SACP's entry into electoral politics as a separate entity, because This will weaken both the ANC and the SACP, and by extension, COSATU and SANCO. But what is clear is that the stance of the party is bound to divide the motive forces of change. It is bound to confuse the electorate. Organizationally, it can spawn or give birth to a nasty and debilitating anti-communist witch hunt in the ANC and set progressive unionists against each other. We have to find a way of dealing with that to explain the politics of broad fronts and vanguards and so on and so forth. But if the party decides to stand on its own in the elections, as is already being debated now, should their members attend the election strategy sessions of the ANC? What will happen in the wards when we come across each other? What is the position of the PYA on this issue? Maybe you need another weekend to debate the issue of the relationship between the NDR and the Socialist Revolution and the relationship amongst the various components of the alliance. So those are the 10 themes, and we need to focus on to take the course of social transformation to a higher level. But as we do so, we should avoid many possible weaknesses. I'll just cite a few. On matters of strategy, we should avoid what I would refer to as performative radicalism. A radicalism that is loud but weak in substance. A radicalism that is internally focused and couched in the narrative of the black elites, rather than broader social transformation. On issues of tactics, we should avoid disruptive conduct and shallowness as compared to superior logic. I've made this point before, that the PYA, even unlike the youth of the 1940s or the youth of Morogoro, has got at its disposal the skills and the expertise of many educated young people. And so in the discourse that takes place within the tripartite alliance and in the ANC, as I've said, we should avoid the sins of incumbency. The politics of a narrow pursuit of cadre deployment and young people as shock troops of factional battles, some of which are based on the flow of money. The young people in the PYA should assert themselves in the battle of ideas, rather than engaging in navel gazing. As we said earlier, the very project of social transformation is under attack from the US administration and its domestic allies, from liberal journalists who have even developed the courage to question the post-1994 dispensation. You might have seen articles by people like Peter Bruce arguing that the ANC was not ready to take government in 1994 because the South African economy is too sophisticated. Call them liberal because those are the positions they have adopted, and they even claim support for democracy and the constitution. But what they say borders on real racism. What does then one find? You find PY activists and leaders focused on attacking ANC leaders. You find a PYA that is concerned about palace politics. You find a component of the PYA, and this will become worse if the party decides to go it alone, arguing why people should not vote for a neoliberal ANC, but for the SACP. As young people, we are not found engaging in the ideological battle of ideas and dominating that battle. We are giving freedom of the ideological highway to reactionary forces. And steadily, the ideas of social transformation losing their hegemonic status within society. And this is also worsened by something that I thought young people, progressive young people, will continue to emphasize beyond tertiary education, that our education system does not assertively mold a generation that appreciates the essence and necessity of social transformation. So the young people who are growing up, grow up without having been schooled in pride in South Africa and with the knowledge about what social transformation is about. So overall, this is my central message. The point I'm trying to make is that the PYA should act as the vanguard of not just progressive young people, but of South African youth generally, across race, class, and gender, and in building a broad front to achieve faster social change. You can, with youthful impatience, lead the ANC and society at large in implementing societal and organizational renewal. In other words, as I was saying about the Mandelas and the Lembedes and the Hanis and the Mbekis, Thabo Mbekis, you are leaders of today, not of tomorrow. The fate of the ANC will depend on what you do. Thank you very much.
We have a lot to discuss and we have a lot on our plate. And we have a lot of responsibilities ahead of us. We do not find solution outside the movement. The movement does have solutions. Now we're going to take discussions. So comrades, when you are raising issues, you must know that we are putting them as a program of action. Give us program-based discussions and some of the things that you wanted to raise yourselves. We have been calling for a social media policy because in the midst of a serious discussions, we are busy insulting and pointing fingers at each other when we have an opportunity to actually raise issues and direct the societal discourse. But now, it's like when someone says ANC must fall, all of us follows. ANC must fall, ANC is wrong. And you ask yourself, is this the ANC that you joined that you are saying it must fall? Let us also try to raise issues that we are going to also raise solutions to them. Solutions are not outside. Solutions are within us.
Comrades, DINOSA specializes in the Department of Health, the health sector. Now, it would be a mistake for us to leave this summit without indicating the challenges that we are facing and also potentially looking into solutions. Comrades, each and every province here in South Africa is what we call a public college of nursing. These colleges, comrades, they use the public funds, government money to train nurses free of charge, of which we appreciate. But then the problem begins, comrades, when now these nurses complete their studies. The government does not hire these nurses. These nurses go on to work for your Mediclinic. They go on to work for Life. They go on to work for private clinics and private hospitals. Now we are saying, comrades, how is it that we are using our own money to train people, whereas those people are not going to help our system? Those people are not going to help our government. Those people or those students who complete their studies in these colleges, they go on to be exploited in private clinics and private hospitals. They work long hours whereas they are paid cents. It's our young people, they are desperate enough to work those long hours for very few cents in the hands of the capital. Now, comrades, it goes to say that if the department or the government doesn't have the necessary funds to go on and employ these young people, why does it continue to use these public funds to train nurses for private institutions? It's wrong, comrades, and I think it's time we call our department or our government to do better. And then we also have this issue of curriculum when it comes to nurses. Comrades, before 2020, there was something called R425 in the nursing profession. It was a curriculum that produced a nurse that can be a midwife, a nurse that can be a community specialist, a nurse that can be a psychiatrist. They have since abolished that curriculum. And then they introduced something called R171, which produces a general nurse. A general nurse that cannot deliver when a woman is pregnant. A general nurse that cannot deal with mental health care issues. Where are we going as a country? We are hearing that this R171 program was copied from a rich country somewhere. It's not helping us, we are not rich. We don't have the luxury to explore such programs, comrades. It is very disturbing. That is why, as DINOSA comrades, we've been calling for bringing back of the R425. We want to produce a nurse that can take care of a pregnant woman, a nurse that can take care of the mental health care users. Also, comrades, the things that we see as student nurses, yeah, if I really dwell much on that, even yourselves would be, comrades, people die in front of us. The things that we touch with our hands, comrades. But howsoever, when it comes to our mental health, we are not catered for. Comrades, in the college that I study in, there is only one person that is being said to be a student counselor. We don't have services to cater for us mentally so. That is why they even say, nurses, they are heartbreakers. We are broken ourselves.
Comrades, many of the speakers spoke about an education that does not cater for us, right? So the solutions are here. So I believe that every one of us can impart on what kind of education do we want? How does it look like? Because it must be the Progressive Youth Alliance with all its partners that knows how that education looks like, because we are dogmatic. I say, no, education is wrong, but injani education is right. Because I believe that an education right is the kind of education that you have in your grade 9 and you can go and open a business. I feel like we need to have a flexible way of being able to access education. We are screaming at each other, we are screaming on these platforms, but we don't really put a context as to why. And also, comrades, if men went on their periods, pads would be available at every petrol station. But comrades, we need your help in terms of helping society to come forth and to say pads must be a necessity. The same way how condoms, because sex is also a choice, but periods are not. I think that maybe the SG of the Youth League, as the leader of the PYA, would maybe assist us with a platform or an email where we can submit our writings in terms of what we wanted to impart to the House, how we wanted it to be done, and then we have it compiled and maybe convene another session so that we can also do monitoring and evaluation, and not to speak just amongst ourselves, but make sure that the things that we speak here are enabled and they get to young people. Thank you.
My name is Kabelo Pungwayo, and I'm a PTT member of the intellectual hub of the PYA, that is the South African Students' Congress. And I must mention, since we're in this house as well, that I'm a former convener of the South African Democratic Teachers Union Student Chapter at WITS. We're more than happy that this session is happening here. We are facing what I call is a complex mutating entity of a crisis in the technical and vocational education training colleges. Now, we usually speak to you about NSFAS, but I thought let me maybe give you a research perspective as I am also embroiled in research in terms of education on technical and vocational education. So there are three primary issues which would arise from research there. And I must mention also that these issues have been noted since 2016. They have been noted at UKZN by a researcher called Msiza. They have been noted at VEDS by a researcher called Rudo. They've been noted at UNISA by a researcher called Doroth. So I'm just amplifying what has been stated there because seemingly that research is not being implemented. So, one, curriculum misalignment with industries. We usually move on the rhetoric that the skills required are not the skills, the skills acquired are not the skills required. But I think that's just a surface level understanding of what is happening with curriculum misalignment. If you look at it properly, you will find that a student who is maybe studying hospitality at TVET in Land or in CJC, that student, when they go to Sentin Sun to do their work integrated learning, they find that they can't use the machinery, they can't use the AI tools, and what they would have learned in the TVET college as part of the theoretical work is not what is therefore required at Sentin Sun in terms of practicality on how to actually perform that vocation to its fullest capacity. Now, what we are saying is that there is an issue with this curriculum misalignment because the TVET colleges, when they are forming their curricula, firstly, they do not involve the industries, wherein you find that a curriculum for an industry that deals maybe with mechatronics at a TVET college, as and when they do their workshops and their practical trainings there inside, you find that even the machines that they are using are not the machines that a student will find when they are going for practice. And we're saying, and as I've stated, research way back from 2016 has been saying that invest and ensure that there is a streamlining of the curriculum between the industries and the colleges. The second issue, again noted since 2016 on TVET colleges, is the issue on the continuous professional development of lecturers. These lecturers in TVET colleges, comrades, in case you did not know, some of them do not have what we call the trade recency. That is to say, if, for example, you are in an industry such as engineering, or maybe let's go to the ICTs. If you are in that industry, you find that there is a lecturer at a TVET college who was appointed back in 2013 when they were still FET colleges before the measure. That person is still lecturing students now. And if you look at technological advancement from 2013 until now, that lecture does not have what we call, therefore, the trade resets. And we don't know what the department is doing about that. The third issue on TVET colleges, Minister, is the unstructured relationship between TVET colleges and universities. One would have an understanding that universities should be the ones that are actually training the TVET college lecturers, but you only find that in mostly universities of technology. Now, on tackling youth depoliticization, I'm saying, comrades, when you read the rise and fall of the ANC Youth League, which I believe is a precursor of most of the things that we're seeing now, in terms of the depoliticization of the youth, that the youth is not able to engineer and produce ideas that take the country forward. There is an issue of political tolerance. Political tolerance only arises as an issue when there is no political education that is constant and continuous across all structures of the PYA. And why would I mention
particularly the rise and fall of the ANC Youth League, is because we must be honest, comrades, that the dilapidation of the Youth League in terms of political education is something that has a butterfly effect on all of us here in the PYA. Because, for example, when I leave SASCO, I'm going to my community, I'm going to join the Youth League. So, we're saying, comrades, if we are to defeat the issue of the youth that is depoliticized, we need to foster clear political education programs. They must not be done because we're ticking a box. This summit, comrades, must go to provinces. It must go to regions. It must go to zones. It must not just end here at the higher level of discussion, because you don't know what Bandile in Soshanguve has to say right now, and you believe that everyone here has the views of Bandile from Soshanguve, while we might have not raised them. So with that being said, comrades, I'm just saying, let us go sit these summits at those levels, and let us do more groundwork in terms of educating young people and ensuring that they are conscious of the situations that they find themselves in, making sure that they are radical, because being radical means not being satisfied with the status quo. Does not mean chanting slogans. Thank you very much, Chair.
One, I also need to respond to the issue of who shall be part of the PYA. Comrade Ngudle, you have the responsibility as the coordinators and secretaries to sit down and scrutinize this. It shall not be the question that is raised here and it vanishes over here. The other issue, it was one of the it is Demons Alliance, not Democratic Alliance, it's Demons Alliance. They are challenging everything. But we are able to tell they are challenging BBEE, they are challenging affirmative action, but can we have a program as young people to deal with that? Can't we not be busy saying they are having this, they are going to court, they are doing that, but us as young people, we are affected and we are doing nothing? You can tell at some point you are detached from the people that you are leading. Sometimes you don't even know their issues. You only get to know the issue of a young person only if that particular person is written something on social media. Which means there is a gap of communication. Then what is it that we can do to communicate better with our people that we are leading as young people? We can't be leaders in papers, we can't be leaders in Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, but we are not leaders on the ground. And we are leaders to those who are associated to us, or for those who are near or who are next to us. But on the ground, it's volatile. And no one knows. If you are told about the issues of the young people, you'll say, what has happened? Because even myself, I don't even know. Once you are a leader and you are saying you don't know about your people, there is a crisis.
In the Department of Education, the trust is not, will not be there, Comrade Put, until basic education turn out. Abantu abaphuma ku-basic education, the learners that are coming out of basic education find space, but at the same time, what is developed there is not talking to what is needed in the university, in the TVETs, because you'd find our young people pass in mathematics literacy in higher numbers. When they get to universities, they don't qualify to be enrolled. They have to go back and upgrade their subjects, meaning that the curriculum in this basic education must also talk to what is necessary at the university and also talk to what is needed on the ground. For that, we are able to cap the unemployment, the people that are starting not to contribute in making employment as well. Because we're a country now that has more graduates than anyone, than people who are not learned. But the most graduates are sitting at home, and Amapara and Amaginza are making money and employing those graduates to clean their money. So we must be able to have an education system from basic education to higher education and everything that talks to the sector and what is needed on the ground and at the working class. The question that remains is, how do we move forward from the point of the resolution that has been taken? It's a bittersweet pill, but then how do we then open a conversation to say, siqhuba njani ke ngoku Maqabane, now that you've taken your resolution? Because there's no reversing it unless we go to early Congress, which is something that I don't foresee as a member of the party going to early Congress. Ithi ke loo nto, even the ANC must hug itself, isibethe emqolweni ithi uxolo wethu imkile le nto, sisebenza njani neparty ke ngoku. Nansi ke option dizane option ke ngoku to the problem. Now you must ke ngoku as the ANC and the alliance and the party as well open lines of communication and develop before we get to uninviting each other in strategic meetings. Before we get there, can't we sit down and say, this is what we have at this point as the alliance and the MDM structures? How do we then make sure that your resolution does not kill us all? Because either way, isichaphazela sonke le nto, whether the party does not contest or it consult, sizawufa sonke if we don't work together for the greater good of the South Africa. Enkosi Sihlalo.
One of the issues that we are faced with, particularly we as young people, more especially from the Progressive Youth Alliance, is that we have stopped taking ourselves serious. And as a result of that, hence why the results that we see each time and again when we contest space with each and every other oppositions. Youth has lost faith in us, in the society, and the space that we occupy. And I think it's a question that we should ask ourselves why. But part of the main reasons why we keep on having these issues is that we amongst ourselves cannot appreciate one another. Into an extent that if there is a comrade that we feel that does much more better in a particular sector than I, will do whatever it takes for us to suppress that young person. And that contributes to the character and the caliber of comrades that we would have within our structures. And some go to an extent of thinking that they are the best amongst us, yet they are not. But another issue that we are faced with a group of young people who are failing to self-cultivate themselves. Our comrades currently do not read. You can hear from the level of engagements when we engage. We do not read, comrades, we do not self-cultivate ourselves. And as a result of that, we think that we are going to champion many issues that are affecting young people, where else we are not going to be. We are failing to be humble in all aspects. The moment we are elected as leaders, we believe that we are above board and we are above everything, and no one can tell us anything. I think the tendencies, and some of the tendencies of which we portray to the young people, must change. You know, it has went to an extent that we might blame some old people within the ANC itself for the loss that we are experiencing and for the image which has been badly portrayed about the ANC. I was saying to comrades, do you know it's some years back what it meant to enter with an ANC t-shirt in a club? It always created a mind that a money spender has came in. We have contributed towards all these things. It is not wrong. But I think we have also contributed towards the downfall of the ANC. And if we have to stand here and deny the fact that the African National Congress is losing power, then we'll be naive, comrades. We have the responsibility as the Progressive Youth Alliance to work together, to believe one another, and to have faith to one another. And no organization within or no formation within the Progressive Youth Alliance should have a big brother syndrome. We are all equal. And the moment we get to internalize that, we'll understand each other's contribution and how important it is for each one of us to appreciate each and every contribution which each one of one makes within the struggle. Comrades, really, if we do not work towards resuscitating our structures, I am telling you, all these structures of the PYA, in the next years to come, we'll be reading about them in museums because they all have got history. So it's upon us that we work together to achieve a common goal. And we must stop jealous amongst ourselves, comrades. Because if we continue with this high level of political jealousy that we have, we are not going to get anywhere. Thank you.
The Youth League was able to keep the ANC or hold the ANC accountable. One of the challenges that we are facing, Comrade Tsakani, is that our own ANC deployees, strategically deployed to different strategic positions, do not have time for the very same organization. We must have a mechanism as to how do we hold our ministers, especially our own deployees, accountable. It would be important that they keep on having time with PYA structures in making sure that they keep us abreast in terms of any changes to be effected. We must not really turn a blind eye on the issue of our education system. If the education system was really addressing or was meant to address our societal issues, I doubt we would be on this position or in this position that we are in. But it seems as though it's an education system that was outsourced from somewhere where we do not know. Comrades, we are having an alarming rate of unemployment, which is not something that we talk about often because we enjoy. We must not talk about unemployment, we must talk about employment. There is no employment at the moment, but there is an alarming and skyrocketing rate of unemployment. NYDA has a mandate which I don't think they understand. We need to monitor their contribution in addressing and advancing the issues of young people. There is money pumped into NYDA which does not seek to address what NYDA is mandated for. There's corruption taking place within NYDA which we blatantly turn a blind eye on because the NYDA comrades are our comrades. We need to change that. For as long as there is still no change in our attitude, and I said this thing earlier, we're not going to get anywhere fast. We will go down in history as the generation, I repeat, in which the ANC as the liberation movement was reduced into a 40% party. And if we do not wake up, the situation that we are facing in this country is not going to change. We then need to put those mechanisms in place, deploy each other on areas where we feel that comrades would do better in addressing these issues. But it would be important that we have regular or bi-monthly or monthly engagements where we monitor as to whether is there any progress in terms of what we have discussed here.
Our education system and our country in general is in high demand for STEM. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. How do we ensure, therefore, that these things become practiced within the Department of Basic Education? Because the challenge that you've always found is a department that always complains about budget constraints, about resources, and so forth and so on. And I'm arguing today to say lack of resources does not translate to cognitive poverty. The fact that there are no resources in government, it doesn't mean that people should be cognitively poor. They should not be able to be intellect. Where do these STEM subjects start? They start in grade R. In what the department has termed now as early childhood development and is building early childhood development centers. There in grade R, we've made severe remarks to say the content is not necessarily really established to benefit us. It's not empowering. We must start aligning high school content. For instance, how we know that there's AP mathematics is through private schools, not through public schools. Let's align our content with that as well. Why are we not presenting AP mathematics to public schools? And that's a solution. We must present AP mathematics to public schools. The learners who get 100% in mathematics in public schools, but are doing mathematics and physics and other science subjects that are not empowering at all. Let them start now to understand limits in the context of the actual definition of a limit. By the way, I'm a product of inferior education myself. I'm finding it difficult to navigate my way there to university because it's so hard. Nothing that I was taught here at high school is helping me. So the entire 13 years was a waste of time. So how then do we ensure that, as we've also wanted to mention in front of the minister to say, how do we ensure that there's a correlation? We should, in fact, ensure that there's a correlation between higher education and basic education. So that when you land into basic education, you don't have to experience the trauma of feeling useless in a classroom, whereas the other white child or Indian child who went to a quintile 5, quintile 4 private IEB Cambridge school feels benefited by this because they did statistics, they know what a distribution is, they did mathematics, they know how to derive, they did physics, they know Albert Einstein's E is equal to mc squared formula. Those are things that we need to address. And we must then come here in this PYA summit and come with education policy frameworks that are going to speak to that. Because if we don't address these things directly, hence why to an extent we've even made this argument to say, it is good that we are now moving towards having comrades that are very educated. And not only educated in a political sciences degree, that is not demanded by the economy, but in a degree that is mathematical statistics, applied physics, theoretical physics, engineering, so that we can then address these things from their grassroots. We want to achieve transformative, fundamental, and mass economic growth. We must, if we want to achieve those things, go back to the grassroots. What is it that is a problem in terms of the balance of payments account in South Africa? What are the terms of trade in the country telling us in terms of the investments that the government is doing in the country? We have made great investments in social transfers. We are not looking at other, much more empowering and long-term investment opportunities in terms of our current account, our capital account, and our financial account, which speak broadly to assets that we can use to grow our economy. It's like we're deliberately making ourselves economically illiterate by assuming that economic development comes before economic growth, of which is the other way around. So we must look at economic growth prospects first, then we can achieve economic development afterwards, and so forth and so on. Now there's a lot, but let me just conclude there, Comrade Chair of the session. Thank you very much.
One of the views that I hold in high regard is, if we are honestly serious about organizational renewal, one of the things we will do is give NGC the right to adopt policy resolutions. Precisely because the delegation that goes into an NEGC of the ANC and the delegation that goes into a national conference of the ANC have two separate minds. The NGC delegation understands that they ought to deal with the policy, but the ones that go to conferences are in fact not interested in the policies. So I think one of the founding things that we also ought to do in amending the constitution is ensuring that the NGC is able to adopt its own resolutions. Members become NEC members, they become ministers, deputy ministers, or deployed in various capacities. And then within the next 5 years, we automatically start processes for conference. But in between, there is no way where we say, Comrade Thabile, for an example, we deployed you as a minister of what? Come to branches, what have you done? These are the policies of the ANC that we said you should implement in terms of a department. Let's hold you accountable. All of that process, none of us see it. And I think hence why a lot of people have lost trust in the ANC again. So in organizational renewal, I think we should allow the masses to be able to ask questions to the deployees of the ANC so that they're able to hold them accountable. For an example, I'll come from the Young Communist League where we say, make education fashionable. So I go and study as hard as possible to make sure that, I'm well learned, I'm capacitated to do whatever it is. But then you come into the movement and you are othered precisely because you are seen as elitist. And therefore, your whatever argument you wish to position, whatever you want to deposit, is seen as elitist. So I think in speaking to elitism, we need to be very precise of what is it that we are talking to, because I think it's also part of the reason why we have lost so much of the working of the middle strata, because these were people that were from poor working class background that got educated and they are in certain positions, and when they want to posit whatever battle of ideas it is within the organization, they are othered because they are seen to be elitist without them being listened to what is it that they can offer to the organization. So I think that one we need to talk to. But I thank you so much, Comrade Chair.
But then we are going to now allow responses where you feel that there must be responses. And I think SG, some of the discussions, you must then incorporate them in your address. And then, yeah.
So I'll just focus, I think, on 3 questions and or comments which were asked. The first one is, I think, specifically around the alignment or misalignment of education at technical vocational education and training institutions with industry, and what are the things that we're doing. And just to be specific, I think about 5-6 years ago we launched what is referred to as centers of specialization, which trains apprentices, that is people who are both in employment or recruited by industry employers and then placed in our TVET colleges, which is the Germans and the Swiss call it the dual system. And the intention is to, expose students to both practical and theoretical elements of their skills development. And then secondly, we have accelerated our production of artisans, which is the NDP target at 30,000 by 2030. And then thirdly, we're introducing occupational trades-focused education from next year. I think there's been this big debate around the phasing out of your N or NATED programs and the introduction of occupational trades. And occupational trades basically is simulated workplace learning. So if you're learning human resources, you learn it in a simulated environment. If you learn electricity, you learn it in a simulated environment. So it's artisans across the board. So we're introducing those occupational trades from next year. We are running a system that has a potential currently of about 2.5 million students. And the idea is to expand the system if the aspirations of the NDP are to be realized to anything between 3.5 and 4 million or even larger. Because if you look at the skills spectrum, it's quite huge, in huge demand. And our point is that we need every little bit of skill. There's no skill that is less important. There are people who just require the skill of operating their cell phones. From a day program on knowing how to operate your cell phone, how to make transactions, digital literacy, a 120-hour program or a week's program on bricklaying, or a 6 weeks program on photography, or a 5 to 7 years journey towards your postdoctoral studies. So this entire spectrum means that the base within which we need to recruit people for skills program is huge. We have about 4.5 million functionally illiterate adults. About 4.5 million young people are not in employment, education, and training. And I think the numbers are even quite evident when it comes to unemployed young people. And so these are the interventions that your skills, your higher education and skills institutions need to be focusing on. So that's that. So this system, big as it is, its agility to adapt to evolving technological demands. I mean, we are still trying to get around 4G. There are countries and economies that are already talking about 5G. We are battling to get a classroom in some of the far-flung rural areas. There are some countries and economies that are talking about a virtual classroom. So our agility compared to the resources that we have and so on and so forth, to be able to adapt to the fast-changing technological needs and demands, especially at technical vocational education and training institutions, is obviously going to be under stress. And that's why we are collaborating and making it intentional to collaborate with industry in order to ensure that we have a successful dual education system, and turning industry and workplaces into spaces for skills development. I fully agree that we need to expand I think I've mentioned the point earlier, and many comrades have emphasized that. Expand the STEM pipeline. The Northern Cape, I think, is number 3 in terms of matric results, if I'm not mistaken. But only 16% of those are in science, technology, and engineering and mathematics. So it means that you're forcing universities to comply with and to structure their program based on what they get. So I think that's quite a big issue. Finally, I think the question that one of the comrades asked and said, we need to reflect on that as the PYA. What is our conception of the role of education in society? And how do we, using whatever skills and capacity we have, research and so on and so forth, existing knowledge, to conceptualize our idea of education in South Africa, both basic, higher and higher education, but without also preoccupying ourselves with formalized education institutions. And so how do we use various other sides of society as producers and transmitters of knowledge, so that we democratize and open up knowledge, particularly with all the available technological developments? I think will go a long way in ensuring that society as a whole carries that burden. So the Youth League, YCL, SASCO, COSAS, all the components of the PYA, I think, need to get together and help us in your own understanding of where we are. And so your conceptualization of what education should be, what kind of results it should produce. Should it merely be, because that's what's being, and probably because that's the agent problem we're confronted with, unemployment, poverty, and inequality, and we tend to focus our education to produce results to respond to that question. That's important, but what else should education, what else should be the role of education in society, and upon that, then what becomes the role of the Progressive Youth Alliance in pushing for that type of education. So thank you very much, comrades, for having engaged us. Thank you.
I'll try to be brief and perhaps start off by even risking making a comment in an area in which I don't have any expertise. The issue pertaining to DINOSA and colleges of education. Maybe just to explain that I'm responding to this merely from the experience that I've had serving on the board of one of the health institutions or companies. And what I found quite difficult to understand is that these private sector health companies are complaining that they have established nurses training colleges. They want to train more, but the South African Nursing Council is blocking them from doing that whilst there is a shortage of nurses. But I thought the input was saying there is a greater supply than there is demand. So it's an issue that I suppose you may want to raise either with the Minister or Deputy Minister of Health. I agree with the other observations made, especially the issue of political intolerance because of shallow knowledge and discourse. It's not something that we can resolve easily. We need to persist with political education. And I would agree that for reflection as the PYA, you may need to have other sessions to reflect on other issues, but also consider sessions at subnational level. There was the observation made about the SACP standing alone in the elections. Perhaps what we did not say, or what one didn't say in the input, is that everyone accepts and acknowledges and recognizes the independence of the SACP as an organization, that it has gone to its Congress, it has taken decisions. But that does not subtract from the need to reflect across the alliance as a whole on the strategic implications of that decision for the national democratic revolution and the extent to which that kind of decision can in fact assist counter-revolution. Yes, it might be possible during campaigns to hug each other and say good luck at what level and so on. But when an old man or old lady asks, but why are you coming to me to say I should no longer vote for the ANC and should vote for the SACP? You'll feel obliged to critique the ANC. There's no avoiding that reality. How do we handle those types of challenges as the alliance? How do we deal with matters to do with the rights and duties of members of the ANC? I saw a report the other day on the Linda Jabane district of the SACP, which is trying to find a creative interpretation of the party's Congress resolution, saying they will call for electoral cooperation with the ANC while engaging all alliance partners and so on. As young people, maybe you have creative ideas on how we can deal with this conundrum. But the reality is that already it has introduced tensions within the tripartite alliance. Talking about rights and duties of members of the ANC, can members of the SACP who are campaigning in the elections participate in ANC election strategy sessions? How do you deal with those issues? Then there was reference to losing elections in the universities. The challenges were identified, but you will later through the SG correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the observations that one has made is that there is a tendency towards revolving doors in many of the university elections. Some organization, maybe from the PYA, will win this year, maybe have some fortune and win the next year, but after that it will be whatever it's called, the organization of the EFF or of the DA. And one of the reasons from my observations is that an issue that we cannot run away from is the challenge of incumbency, even at the level of student politics. What lifestyles do we lead after our elections onto the SRC and other bodies within the universities? How do we conduct ourselves in relation to matters of procurement in the universities? So the point that one is trying to make is that the challenge of sins of incumbency applies also to the student movement. And by the way, it also applies on the shop floor. Why the NUM declined and AMCU was able to rise in Sibanye, whatever it was called before, was the scene of incumbency in the mining sector amongst the unions that are in charge. You get elected as a shaft steward according to what we negotiated and the freedom we have won. The shaft steward then leaves the shaft and goes to sit in an air-conditioned office as a shaft steward, so that you are able to do your work as a representative of the unions. A month down the line, because of the new salary, you are driving a 4x4. And workers from underground can observe that. And they will also want to rise to become incumbents. So the scenes of incumbency straddle many areas of activity, and we need to learn and perhaps debate and reflect on the issue of how do you ensure the persistence of revolutionary consciousness in the context of a liberated society. It's not an easy matter. There was the question whether you can make progress in education if you have a DA minister. I suppose the Youth League will debate through the NWC and other structures about how the president needs to handle matters of this nature. And perhaps the solution will then be that that DA minister should go to trade and industry, and trade and industry should be taken over by the DA, and you'll then have a strike of workers. To prevent challenges of this kind, where you have a DA Minister of Education, you need to win elections. On the issue of constitutional amendments, some of the things can be introduced without constitutional amendments, but others perhaps cannot. It's an issue that we need to look at. And related to that is the matter of elitism that was raised in terms of marginalizing the educated in our ranks. Perhaps we need to make the fundamental point. No revolution can succeed without the participation of a significant section of the middle strata, including the educated. Just ask yourself, if you were to start with ancient history, who were Marx and Engels and others? They were part of the middle strata and educated. Who were the Mandelas and the Slovos and the Chris Hannis? Part of the middle strata and were educated. And so any revolution that marginalizes its educated is in fact committing suicide. In conclusion, I would want to say, one of the fundamental things I think arising from the discussion today, the PYA needs strategic reflections on the current conjuncture, where you discuss matters of strategy, of tactics, of organizational renewal, and so on, and develop approaches that will help to guide not only the PYA and the youth, but the revolutionary movement in its totality. That is needed, and we do hope that that session will come. Thank you.
I want to thank Comrade Joel and Comrade Buti for their responses, and also comrades yourselves for the deliberations that you have put forward. Now we're going to call the SG of, I don't know who will come between the SG, but Swayoko to come and greet so that the SG can come in with the closing remarks. So Comrade Swayoko is our sister organization from Swaziland. So this is the youth organization of our strategic ally in Swaziland running and leading the revolution for the freedom of people of Swaziland.
The president, when he was opening this platform, he said, comrades, we'll find ourselves facing a situation whereby the gains of the revolution being reversed. I think today, ourselves, I think as the Swaziland Youth Congress, comrades, we are facing that particular situation right now, and we feel it, we know how it is. In these instances, that will be starting by to say, how do we find ourselves a part and parcels of the Progressive Youth Alliance? Comrades, we are not here in the Progressive Youth Alliance, comrades, in the instance that we are as guests as it may look like today. But comrades, I want to bring a little bit history that may cover why we find ourselves that we can be part and parcel of this platform, and we feel maybe it will be deemed that our logo can even appear on this part of this program. One, I will start back, comrades, on a history, comrades, that in Swaziland there's an organization by the name of Pudemo. Pudemo, comrades, was founded by the comrades of the ACCP, or comrade Chris Hani, and other comrades of the ANC, or comrade Mzala Nxumalo, in Swaziland, back then in 1983, comrades. When things evolved, there was a need, comrade, that SWAYOCO was founded in 1992. Of course, it was the advice of the ANC and more so the ACCP that does that part in Swaziland here. Because, comrades, we should understand today that whatever happening in Swaziland directly or indirectly affects South Africa, one way or the other. And Swaziland cannot survive 3 weeks if South Africa can decide today that, you know what, we are closing this farm, we don't deal with this Paza shop. But today, comrades, I want to affirm that maybe, Comrade SG, it could be at your attention that if we may do a research based on the former president of the ANC, which is Comrade Melusi Kikaba, and other, even Comrade, now the current SG, which is Comrade Mbax, and the Comrade Kwete, they adopted SWAYOCO to be part of the Progressive Youth Alliance. In the instance that they understood very well that our comrades from SWAYOCO and Pudemo are here in South Africa. We are the only organization in the Southern African region that got structures that existed within South Africa, comrades. Last week, we have our regional congress at Kosatu House. We have a branch in Nelspruit, we have a branch in Pelapela, we have a branch in Pretoria, we have a branch in Gauteng. We are the only one who exists in South Africa, comrades, in the essence as SWAYOCO. And also, comrades, we are the only organization that have comrades that are leading structures of the ANC and the ANC Youth League. In Mpumalanga, we have in Nkomazi region, we have comrades Tembile serving as the deputy chairperson there. Comrade Philmon was leading SASCO at the VETS, and he was president of SASCO. And now he's the chief whip in the ANC at Mpumalanga. I think everyone may know Comrade Philmon Lukele. And we have a comrade, Bongan Masuk, maybe many of you know him. He's the international relations at COSATU now. This is the former president of SWAYOCO, who is lead 2 times. He's the international relations, comrades. Where does the history and relations come from in understanding the struggle of Swaziland and when it talks about a liberation, of course? We could be part and parcel in this gathering, not solely because we are invited as guests, but we want to be part of you, comrades, so that you can take our struggle towards, in terms of concluding our struggle in Swaziland. There's a current issue, comrades. I think all of us here, we need, as the Progressive Youth Alliance, comrades, we should focus on. There's a crime that is happening in Swaziland by the United States of America, comrades. Mswati, comrades, has had a secret deal with the United States of America worth 9.2 billion, which is $500 million US dollars. The secret deal, comrade, it allows, they project them as hardcore criminals in the US. They are now 5, the 6th one is arriving in. It is supposed to arrive tomorrow. They classified them as hardcore criminals, comrades. And We should not dilute like we are not reading the space of the global politics. There is no way someone could decide to dump criminals, 150 criminals, in Swaziland, a small country like that. Why? The first question that we should ask ourselves, why Swaziland? Why does this Swaziland? So that tells us that South Africa is under attack, comrades. You know, you can never trust the US, comrades. Today they can bring people and say these are criminals. In the future, these people will be attacking South Africa directly or indirectly. So we should try by all means, comrades, to stop this thing. In the 19th of September, comrades, we are marching as Pudemo, Swayoko external region. Lapaya, Epitoli. We are going directly to the US Embassy as well as the Swazi High Commission. 19 September, Comrade SG, I think you are quite aware in your offices. We have tried to write letters to one of our own alliance here, which is the YCL as well as the ANC Youth League in the province, as well as the national. That in that march, comrades, I think the Progressive Youth Alliance should take shape and be in charge, comrades. It is high time we confront that thing, and that thing should stop. Because 150 of unknown people, and when deeper research is done, comrades, about those people were not in prison in the US, some of them. They own the street and living their life. Because in Jamaica, the one that they were saying is coming from Jamaica. Jamaica is disputed that we didn't, because the statement came as if, like, Jamaica has rejected those criminals, hence they need to be dumped in Swaziland. And then Jamaica has to say, no, Chief, we didn't deny our own. There was no time that these people were brought back to us. Then the question comes back to us, who are those people? They classify them as hardcore criminals. 150 people, criminals in Swaziland. The Southern African region, comrades, should not be a dumping site of the United States of America. The fight called the liberation that we fought for these many years, we cannot allow silly bases to be crafted next to South Africa like this way. Whereas we see that the United States of America is attacking South Africa this hard. Then we cannot allow such deals. Whereas then now we allow Swaziland to take 70% of electricity in South Africa. In Swaziland, we don't even produce a matchstick to make light. We take everything in South Africa. We can't even have enough milk. We purchase food here in South Africa. The budget of Swaziland comes from the SACU receipts from the 14 borders that we share with South Africa. And then Swaziland will have secret deals with the United States without involving the South Africa. Of course, the Freedom Charter talks about sovereignty of other national countries, specifically Lesotho and Swaziland. But it is high time, comrades, we stop that nonsense.
We are going to call upon the Secretary General, Comrade Mdokolo Ngudle, to come and give us the closing remarks of the PYA Summit.
No, thank you very much, Comrade First DSG. Greetings to our veteran, Comrade Joel Nachitenze, and in their absentia, the ministers that were here, Minister Ndabeni would have indicated that because the former Deputy President, Comrade Begi, is here, former Deputy President of the Youth League, who is also an advisor in her office, is here, then the department in its representation. And Comrade Puti would have indicated that he wanted us to conclude before 7 so that he has a journey to take. But we thank him for coming and being part of the Progressive Youth Alliance Summit, convened after many years of absence. We would have indicated, comrades, through the President in his opening remarks that we thank SATU Student Chapter for hosting us here, giving us all of these niceties that it has given us, including breakfast, lunch, and everything that it has given us, including writing pads and everything else. It's a very sign of commitment, comrades, on the part of the comrades who have got the resource to ensure that a platform like this does sit, where Progressive Youth Alliance structures have an opportunity to reflect and engage on critical issues that are affecting our domestic politics and our sub-regional politics as they have been indicated by the various speakers. But critical, comrades, among other reasons, comrades, we had to convene this PYA summit is to have these discussions about the state of our state, the state of education, the state of health in our country, and the state of the economy in South Africa. And what does this mean to young people in their various social formations or social stratas in which they belong? Because it's important, Comrade Joel, that these discussions are held by the Progressive Youth Alliance first. Because often what we had indicated on, which President raised earlier, there was a national convention that was convened by our national government, and the national convention totally excluded the Progressive Youth Alliance. And our view has been very clear, comrades, that if the Progressive Youth Alliance is excluded, that was supposed to be a very remarkable, milestone in our country's social compacting, because that's what the convention was to do. It was a national convention for the purpose of the national dialogue. And if in the crafting of the detail of what would be of the national dialogue, including the election of is to be a steering committee of the national dialogue, if the Progressive Youth Alliance is not there, who then must be there? Because, comrades, if the national dialogue concludes, it will conclude with the hopes, aspirations of the South African people for the next, almost 70 years, like the Freedom Charter was crafted in 1955. So it's such a very important milestone. But progressive forces were excluded, Comrade Joel. And it's our gripe with that national convention. We're saying we can't allow a hijack of the true going transformation of our country to be given to other forces that are fly by night, which we don't know, which represents no constituency, which are not part of any democratic process. It's us, the progressive forces. We are not saying we want to impose ourselves, but we are part and parcel of a very critical component of the social manifestations in our country. And that's really our gripe, because we feel like there can't be a future that is discussed about this country at the exclusion of the Progressive Youth Alliance. We're talking about COSAS, we're talking about SASCO, we're talking about the ANC Youth League, YCL itself, COSATU and all its affiliates. And there's a matter departing from that, Comrade Joel, and which we would want, and that's why we are so appreciative of a person of your caliber and your age who gives time to talk to the young people of his organization and his country, and really gives the detailed engagement and takes that particular work very seriously, and comes to the Progressive Youth Alliance Summit well prepared. And we're very thankful of that. Comrade Puti, Comrade Stella, for the same. But we want to say, Comrade Joel, that as the Progressive Youth Alliance, noting what you have raised in this particular deliberation and the deliberations that comrades would have made in this particular session, that a critical, among other things, is an important aspect that nobody talks about, which gives effect to all these social ills. And we think that we've got to have this more of the political education sessions with yourselves, because we believe some of the formulations need to be reworked in terms of how we should be conducting the true going national democratic revolution in South Africa, or national democratic transformation, as it were. Because if we keep on romanticizing and negotiating the the land question, for example, in South Africa. We will never, Comrade Joel, eradicate the colonial and apartheid spatial economic planning. We will never. Because this apartheid and colonial spatial economic planning is rooted right in the means of production and productive forces. And now we are now reproducing poverty, underdevelopment, and spatial inequalities. As a result that we don't want to be rough. We don't want to rock the leaking boat. The boat is leaking, and it's about to make all of us sink. And it's not that we don't have the levers of transformation in our hands. We do. But we want to negotiate while the other side, and I'm saying the other side because those who are established owners of the means of production, and we are now handing over productive forces to them, inherited that wealth from colonialism and apartheid. And that's the reality that the majority of our people currently, Comrade Joel, who are African or black in general, they are inheriting these inequalities which were systematically imposed on them through legislative forms like the 1913 Land Act, the Group Areas Act, and so on. From the Glenn Gray Act, and all of these, which are systemic ways which were utilized through legislation to, dispossess the African people of land and of economic activity. In the process of wanting to talk about that, or talking about industrialization of the South African economy, on the other hand, we're handing over critical productive factors into private sector, into this crop that we need to grow, of young people who are engineers, who are economists, who are entering into the productive sectors because of their own professions, who are supposed to come into these sectors with low cost of productive forces, so that the cost of accessing land, which is accessing industrial sites or factories, is lower. But at this moment, it is higher. Even if a person is a mechanical engineer, wants to open a small mill plant, it will be very costly for them to do so. Because the cost of accessing land in South Africa, it is very expensive. And it therefore blocks their social reproductive capability in terms of them being able to enter into the mainstream sectors, downstream sectors of the economy, which are productive in their nature. Young people who have been given mining permits, for example, they do mining, and after that, their stockpiles, they can't be able to take their own stockpiles, whether chrome or gold, into the export market themselves. They have to sell it to an already established, mostly white companies, like Glencore and Kumba, and they don't get the net, profits that they are supposed to get in the export market. And as a result of that, they then become laborers. They need to recalibrate the size and shape, yes, of higher education and education and basic education, including the curriculum content that is offered. The Progressive Youth Alliance is not found in the solution-orientated national discourses. We're not happy about the quality of the skills provided through either sitters, service providers, because of refusing to be co-opted on degenerative discussions that have nothing to do with the revolution, but everything to do with the individual leaders who want the Youth League to be its own stormtroopers for whatever they want to propagate, and not wanting to listen to what are the interests of this youth. We're not a Progressive Youth Alliance or a Youth League that is co-opted on insulting leaders. That may have been the case of the Youth League you are mentioning, that was co-opted by the Brett Capels of this world and all of that, which attempted to, or continues to want to attempt to do cultural, co-option of the revolution through, this process of creating, what we refer to as celebrity activists who are preoccupied about all of these things that celebrities are preoccupied about, which we are not saying the creatives must not, but the revolutionaries have got more to do than to want to be like creatives. And that's the element that you must talk about, not this one. This generation wants economic freedom now, and it is very serious about it. We must continue to have an engagement of what must be the solutions of the challenges that are facing young people. To comrades, it is important, comrades, as part of the ongoing, what we are going to be doing. Now that we, SART2 student chapter has opened for us this particular venue of theirs, we will continue to come to this venue. We will have scheduled PYA meetings, but we must make it known, comrades. The Progressive Youth Alliance is in its normal composition. It is SASCO, it is COSAS, it is YCL, it is the COSATU youth structure. SART2 youth chapter, including DINOSA youth chapter, are affiliates of COSATU youth structure, which make them being part of COSATU youth structure. SWAYOCO has always been part of us, like we have been part of SWAYOCO. And it has always been the case, historically, even for the ANC in exile. It has always been part of organizations of those particular countries, in that they would have given, like we have done today, comrade of SWAYOCO, to give you a message of solidarity, in that you are part of the Southern African region, and part of the progressive forces, as we've recognized you yourself in terms of as the organization. And that is why, comrades, we must have frank discussion, not insultive discussion, frank discussion that these are the things that we must do in order to make our organizations much stronger.